business, for culture, for Africa. Partner with Channel Africa.
It's 6 o'clock Central African time. A very good morning to you and welcome to Africa Rise and Shine. We're coming to you live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. Coming to you via DSTV 802 on OpenView. We are on 6 to 8 and we are on www.channelafrica.co.za as well as SABC Plus. My name is Asanda Beda. Thanks to Jabu Nkolele for driving us up until this point with that great music. Good morning. How are you? Colleague?
I'm absolutely fabulous, actually. It's a Thursday and it feels like this week has been going quite quickly. I don't know if it's the same for you. Maybe because we're really busy. Yeah, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much indeed. It's still a bit chilly here in Johannesburg, but sometimes we forget actually we're in the middle of winter in the southern hemisphere, particularly where we are. And we've got a packed program as usual. A couple of things that are in the news at the moment. It seems economic hardship in Egypt is driving people to neighboring Egypt. And we're also finding out that macadamia producers in South Africa have began exporting their produce to Asia. Do you like macadamia nuts?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes. They take a very long time to grow. A tree takes about 7 years before it actually really becomes productive. But yeah, they quite a lucrative business.
Yeah, no, we had macadamias at home in Zimbabwe when I was a kid.
Awesome.
Yeah, very nice. Let's begin with the news with Jolane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. The South African National Defence Force has announced that its first group of soldiers who were deployed in the eastern DRC will finally come home on Friday. The SANDF has been part of the SADC mission in Congo to restore peace and security in the eastern parts of Congo, but M23 rebels and other groupings have since captured swathes of land in Congo. The SADC leaders decided to withdraw the mission to give peace talks a chance. Kaelihle Khumalo has more.
The withdrawal of the SADC mission in the DRC has been conducted in a structured manner to ensure the safe return of South African troops and their military equipment. It's been a delicate process as they travelled with the armaments from Goma and Sake in eastern DRC via Rwanda to Tanzania in Chato, which has been designated as their assembly point. They are expected to arrive at Air Force Base Bloemspruit in Bloemfontein, and the estimated time of arrival is 12 midday on Friday. The troops will be welcomed by the Defence and Military Veterans Minister, Angie Motshekga, alongside the members of the Military Command Council.
Premier of South Africa's Eastern Cape Province, Oscar Mabuyane, has named lack of resources for the number of fatalities in devastating floods that hit the province this week. The death toll is currently sitting at 49. The OR Tambo region is the hardest hit with 39 fatalities. Mabuyane says they have one helicopter to respond to all emergencies.
I'm saying this because it's a point that we have been articulating and making each and every time we are experiencing disaster, whether we talk about fighting crime. The point that we've been making and the submission that we've made even nationally is for the additional resources, with understanding that prevention is better than cure. This province can't have one chopper that is based in Nelson Mandela, because our experience is that when the weather is terrible, the helicopter cannot take off. So immediately we've got a helicopter that is Nelson Mandela is equal to none. It's not there. It's non-existing.
Still in South Africa, Deputy Director General at the National Health Department, Dr. Anban Pillay, says the 100 Days mission is important for global health security. The 100 Days mission focuses on global collaboration ahead of time for effective interventions, which will be made across the world within the first 100 days of a pandemic threat. Pillay was speaking at the 4th G20 Health Working Group meeting in Johannesburg, where world leaders and policymakers are discussing pandemic interventions this this week.
It's a bit like an orchestra, so there's different parts that need to come together. When we have an outbreak, we would need to identify the pathogen and what we describe as characterize it. In other words, understand its structure and how does it affect body systems. Then we need to understand how could we best interfere with its ability to harm us. And then we design a vaccine based on that or a drug. So once the characterization happens, those that develop vaccines, we need to quickly work in the lab and put together a vaccine that disrupts its ability to harm us. Or somebody who's developing a drug needs to do that.
The Sudanese army says it has retreated from the Libya-Egypt-Sudan border triangle area. The section is now under the control of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The army on Tuesday accused troops loyal to Eastern Libyan military commander Khalifa Haftar of carrying out an attack alongside the RSF. Haftar's forces denied participating in a cross-border attack. The BBC's Will Ross has the details.
This is a big setback for the Sudanese army. It had been using former rebels from Darfur to help it protect the border with Libya, but following fighting this week, they've now withdrawn and the army's rival, the Rapid Support Forces, control the border triangle. This means it'll be far easier for the RSF to bring in weapons via Libya and link up with the Libyan military commander Khalifa Haftar's forces. The Sudanese army says the United Arab Emirates is behind all this. Despite denials from Abu Dhabi, there's strong evidence that the UAE has backed the RSF and Khalifa Haftar's forces.
And finally, South Korea has suspended loudspeaker broadcasts in North Korea, which have been playing along the border since last year, July. The new president, Lee Jae-myung, wants to improve bilateral ties and had promised to stop them. Organizations advocating for human rights of North Koreans have criticized his move. The BBC's Mickey Bristow reports.
In the past, when South Korea has shown goodwill, the North Korea has responded, and it's often left-leaning governments in South Korea that try to get on better with North Korea. A previous president a few years ago, Moon Jae-in, for example, he met Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, at one of these periods of the country's getting on well again. So I'm sure the current leader, Lee Jae-myung, believes the same. He just wants to get on as well as he can with North Korea, but these things tend to go in cycles between North and South Korea. There are periods when they're getting on better, periods when they're not.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, former Mamelodi Sundowns captain Hlompo Gekana believes coach Miguel Cardoso can win the CAF Champions League title. And Kagiso Rabada takes 5 wickets, but Australia hits back as bowlers dominate the first day of the World Test Championship. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
All right, at 8 minutes past 6, we're about to enter into our Africa Roundup, which is what we do every day on Rise and Shine after the news. But first, let's thank the team. Thanks to Catherine Maleka, who is on our technical production desk. Thanks to Hlengiwe Mabaso, Joey Lukhodi, and Pumuzo Ramakadza. They are the producers of Rise and Shine. Thanks to Talent Butelezi, who handles our social media. And thanks to the news brought to you by Jolani Tulo. On economics is Tabiso Lihuku, and on sports is Fikile Lingwati. And if you've just joined us, well, you can find us on social media at Channel Africa 1 is our handle across those different platforms. Let's start today with Egypt, where a crackdown and economic hardship there is driving a growing number of Sudanese to head for Libya, where the situation is precarious for refugees, and even to try their luck on the dangerous crossing to Europe. David Doyle has more.
Now in Greece, Ba el-Din Yaqub fled Khartoum when a missile ripped through his home and killed 4 of his friends. Yaqub decided to try his luck on the dangerous smuggling routes through the desert into northeastern Libya.
The route of Salum Mountain was difficult, very difficult. The government of Egypt was strict, and the Libyan government was strict. Even the smugglers themselves don't see you as human. They treat us like animals. They pick up stones and hit you.
Yaqub thought Libya would be better. Instead, he says, it was worse than both Egypt and Sudan.
Producers of macadamia nuts in South Africa have begun exploring Asian markets after US President Donald Trump announced a 31% tariff on US imports from the world's leading macadamia nut grower. As the US is the second largest macadamia market, farmers are now looking to alternatives to keep their businesses alive. Sean Hogan has more.
Jean Lacanya's macadamia nut farm has been built up over 2 decades in South Africa's Madimbo Valley. But he now faces a sudden challenge from US import tariffs, causing him to look for other markets.
I think the figure I saw a few weeks back was that if Trump had to activate the 30% tariff, then we'd be paying close to 460 million rand worth of tariff at 30%. That's what a tariff means. That's R500 million out of our economy into the tariff. There's so much more we can do internationally or explore other markets. I mean, India has got 1.5 billion people that are also looking for macadamia. So there's always an alternative plan.
South Africa's Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Professor Blade Nzimande, is currently in the Chinese city of Chengdu, leading a South African delegation participating in the second Ministerial Belt and Road Science and Technology Conference.
This is the second conference convened by the Chinese government under the auspices of what they call the Belt and Road Initiative, which is a developmental program conceived in 2013 and implemented by the Chinese government in the main to assist and cooperate with developing countries in many areas of development. So one of the areas which they introduced last year was science and technology exchange, just to look at how can we strengthen cooperation in science, technology and innovation as the developing South, poorer countries working together with China, and how can we benefit from each other's experiences.
Africa doesn't have a renewable energy challenge, but one of poor investment in energy from the continent. Now, this is the view of South Africa's Minister of Energy and Electricity, the Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Josienso Ramokgopa, who will be hosting the 2025 African Green Hydrogen Summit from today in Cape Town. Minister Ramokgopa says that it's essential for the continent to resolve its energy crisis, as electricity power will power the production of hydrogen.
The Africa Green Hydrogen Summit will bring together African energy ministers, policymakers and investors to discuss the continent's emerging green hydrogen sector.
We need each other for us to be able to transition, because they are sitting with the money. Of course, we can go to the Chinese, we can go to the Middle East, we can go all over. The money can be found, but they don't have the endowments that we have. So it's important that when we enter the conversation, we enter as equals. So no one is doing us a favor. We are not doing them a favor. We must find a meeting point, a place of alignment, a place of convergence, so that we are able to benefit humanity. I'm making this point because when you go to multinational fora, an impression is created that we need the industrialized countries more than they need us. I'm making the point that we need each other.
Lesotho's Disaster Management Authority has issued a warning asking travelers to delay their plans or consult officers for advice. The Meteorology Department anticipates most of the public roads to be cleared by Friday. Rapelang Khadebe has more from Maseru.
The heavy snowfall has rendered most of the roads in the Lesotho Highlands inaccessible, and in some cases only 4x4 vehicles can make it through.
The Lesotho is the only country that lies entirely 1,000 meters above sea level, which is why we are blessed with snow in winter. I mean, I think in all of Africa, we have the heaviest snowfalls, and we are the coldest country in Africa.
But for most of the locals, the main worry is keeping warm, and the horse is the only guaranteed form of transport to navigate through these complicated terrains. While snowfall might pose a temporary inconvenience to some locals, the long-term benefits of the melting snow is the pristine waters that flows into the Mahale Dam and makes it all the way to Gauteng province through the Lesotho Highlands Water Project.
All right, and that report from Lesotho brings to an end today's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll have more for you tomorrow after the 6 o'clock news. Coming up shortly, though, we focus our attention on Central Africa. Asanda will be speaking to Aaron Ngambi. Stay with us for that.
Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba.
Alors peut-on considérer cette décision comme un désengagement durable des États-Unis vis-à-vis du développement africain ou s'agit-il d'un simple réalignement stratégique?
Bon, ça peut être les deux à la fois. Donc, au lieu de donner de l'argent à la Banque africaine de développement pour partager en vrac, ils préfèrent maintenant donc cibler les pays partenaires en Afrique. Ça, c'est pour le réalignement stratégique. Alors, et aussi, ce n'est pas un désengagement durable, mais je pense que dans les 2 ou 3 prochaines années, il veut d'abord remettre de l'ordre dans ces affaires.
Vue d'Afrique. Du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
Start your day informed, inspired, and entertained. Asanda and Peter bring you Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time.
Well, now we look at some of the stories making headlines in Central Africa coming after Africa Roundup. This is the area of the continent that we zoom into on this Thursday. And we speak to Aaron Ngambi. He's a geopolitical analyst. Aaron, how are you on this Thursday?
Morning, Yanda, and how are you?
I'm good, thank you so much. It's always great catching up with you on these stories in the region. Let's start today with the Central African Republic. Bishops there are appealing for an end to violence. People are said to be fleeing, and there's devastation as a civil war continues there from 2012. What can you tell us about this story?
Yeah, it's a very sad story, very unfortunate. There has been a civil war going on for a very long time. Unfortunately, the civil war hasn't received a lot of attention in the media as it should be. But it's very encouraging now to see that bishops that came from all different sectors and different backgrounds across the entire country have come together to actually call for this end to the civil war. If you look at the Central African Republic, I think about 76% of the population is Christian. They have about 16% Muslim and other minority religions. So I think that it's encouraging to see the predominant faith, the Christian faith, step to the plate and call for an end to this civil war that's been raging for many years now.
The bishops have been reported as saying that people have been shot, have been wounded, have been tortured, even executed, and they are calling for prayer. What's the response been to this call?
I think the response is positive so far, as we have seen that a lot of people seem to support what the bishops are calling for. Because this is the only way out. It seems like the violence has been too much. Therefore, the call for peace, call for prayer is a message that I think a lot of people are waiting for. I think that these bishops are stepping to the plate and providing leadership in a crisis.
They welcome those who want to discuss and work on peace and reconciliation. Just yesterday in our home country, South Africa, we were talking about a national dialogue that's been called by our own president, Cyril Ramaphosa. Would this work in a similar fashion? Do we understand this call in terms of how it would work to discuss this work on peace and reconciliation?
Well, when you look at the call for peace and reconciliation, usually if it is a call from the politician and they have specific political agendas, you are bound to have some kind of hiccups or even obstacles along the way. But this call that is exclusively coming from the bishop in Central African Republic, they want people to come to the table, key decision makers and players in this conflict, so that they can dialogue and be able to forge towards peace. And I think that is more effective because then people do not perceive these bishops as being politically aligned.
Pope Francis made a visit there in 2015. What progress did this make to getting closer to peace in the country, if at all it did?
Yes, in 2015, we saw Pope Francis visit the Central African Republic. And like I said, this is a population of about 5.7 million people, and 76% are Christian, and 44% of that 76 are Catholic. So you are talking of almost the majority of the population are Catholic, and only 14% are Muslim and 10% are other ethnic religions. But the visit by the Pope was very significant. I mean, we saw a country that has been torn by war for some time and been able to come together for a moment and be able to acknowledge the presence of the Pope. So I think in that regard, the bishops coming together and trying to foster peace will perhaps bring back those memories and be able to allow people to have some confidence in the peace process.
All right, let's move on now, Aaron, to a UN Regional Office for Central Africa, or UNOCA. They've released a report on Central Africa. The report cites challenges, even though the area is rich in potential. What else is central to note from this report or observation?
Well, this report tells us that countries such as Chad and Gabon have made progress in terms of political development. Newly elected authorities must capitalize on that. Mm-hmm. And in some of these developments, we've discussed them, I think, extensively. We've looked at Chad and Gabon in terms of what they're doing with the IMF and some of the their agenda for development. And so those two are on a good path, though much can be done going forward. But also in terms of just political advancement. In Chad, you have about 34% of the National Assembly is supposed to be represented by women. And also Gabon has this new electoral code that mandates women to have at least 30% of the seats in the National Assembly. So all of these good indicators that there's progress in countries like that in the region, but there's still some challenges, and a lot of them. Of course, you look at Cameroon, is one of the countries where you will find a lot of problems in terms of politics and in terms of governance as well. And also you have conflict in other regions such as the Lake Chad Basin and the Great Lakes region. There are so many conflicts going on over there. And so this is what the report looks like. On one hand, I think we're making progress in a few countries. On the other hand, there's still challenges.
Rwanda and the DRC obviously were going to be mentioned. But what is the report saying in terms of humanitarian aid there?
The report actually talks about a humanitarian crisis, which is compounded by conflict with the neighboring Sudan as well. And so the report, when it comes to DRC and Rwanda, is not very, the outlook is not very good. And this is primarily because of what we've talked about in the past, the war and the conflict going on in the eastern DR Congo by the M23 rebels. That has created a huge problem for the region and for those countries.
Let's move to Cameroon now, where the opposition leader there, Maurice Kamto, has returned to Yaoundé. He was under house arrest. Why was he under house arrest?
Well, before he was under house arrest, Kamto was in France, in Paris. He had a huge rally with some of his supporters. And so, as we know, he contested in the previous elections, even though he didn't do very well. He claimed that there were some electoral malpractices, but then he went to France. He had this rally, and then when he came back home, he was put under house arrest for 48 hours. That's 2 days. And so we do know that this is just an attempt by the regime to restrict his movements because they have an election coming up in October 2025. So I think that this is just basically harassment and intimidation, and also part of surveillance. They've been trying to restrict his movement so that he does not appeal to his base. He runs a political party called the Cameroon Renaissance Movement, the CRM.
And he intends to run in the upcoming elections under the Cameroon Renaissance Movement. Why is he being criticized by party officials from the ruling party, though?
Yeah, I think that it is just usual politicking. There's no basis for criticizing him for running again. I think he's determined to run. He has the constitutional right to do so. He's only 71 years old. And so he's up against the incumbent who's ruled Cameroon forever, since I think 1985. And so the current president of Cameroon, who's 91 or 92 years old, it's not even clear yet if he's going to run for re-election again in October this year. But the opposition leader, Kamtu, has, kicked off his campaign, and he is actually out there trying to get his supporters. But he has a message. He has a message, and he seems to be appealing for peace and calm, and not to have his supporters antagonize with the security forces. And so this is quite intimidating by government officials, because they see him as potentially going to win this election, looking at the incumbent is age and also his health as well.
What do electoral laws provide for in Cameroon to ensure that when he does run, that his running or his campaign is allowed to be free and fair?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that the issues of free and fair elections for Cameroon has been a point of contention for many people. There are many people that really doubt the authenticity of a free and fair election in Cameroon over a few decades. Like I said, the current president of Cameroon, Paul Biya, has been in power since 1980s. And so we doubt very much that the elections in the past have been free and fair, but going forward, I think that there's been some electoral reforms that might ensure that this election in October might be different. And I think this is why the officials in government are feeling the heat, and they probably do not have a replacement for the current incumbent if he decides not to run.
Okay, shifting to the next topic now. The U.S. wants Rwandan troops out of Congo before a peace deal is signed. Is this a condition or is it a suggestion?
Well, for what we know, it seems like the proposed drafted document was leaked to one of the main news outlets. I think it's Reuters. And those people that have seen the document make it very explicit that this seems to be a condition. Now, there was some investigative journalism that was done and tried to make sure that these are authentic documents. Neither U.S. officials, Rwandese officials, or even the DR Congo officials have actually confirmed that these are verifiable documents. So this is actually the draft. But it seems like from what we've heard, these drafts, these are serious drafts. The draft is serious, and these are documents that will be on the table as the two parties go to Washington, D.C. to sign the deal. The only problem is that if this is a condition for moving forward for this peace deal, I'm afraid Rwanda might decide to do otherwise. The reason why it's because the U.S. for the longest time have accused Rwanda of arming the M23 rebels and providing support to them, yet Rwanda has refused that they are not involved in the DR Congo.
And staying in the Congo, MSF, or Doctors Without Borders, has tallied the latest numbers in terms of sexual violence taking place there. And they are calling for a prioritization of aid in terms of dealing with this. But what else are they saying?
Well, the reports coming from Doctors Without Borders is very bad in the DR Congo, in the conflicted region. I think the reports show that up until 2024, there's been over 40,000 women, children that have been sexually violated. And so these are serious issues. And the other thing they're calling for is not only for an end to these kind of atrocities, but also they're calling for some kind of accountability. I think that they want the conflicted parties, regardless of who is right, who's wrong, both on the government side and the rebel forces, to stop this and stop immediately.
What immediate action is needed? Because this is a worrying trend.
I think some of the immediate actions that can be taken into account is to ensure that first and foremost, this conflict concludes as soon as possible. I mean, there is hope now with the proposed peace deal in Washington, which is supposed to be signed in June this month. But also there's been some talks going on in Doha in Qatar concerning the same conflict. So the moment that you bring about the ceasefire, the moment that you can bring an end to some of these atrocities. And also it will be easy to account for who's responsible once there is a ceasefire. But once the fighting still goes on, it is very difficult to hold accountable those people that are responsible for such actions.
Well, let's leave it there for today. Aaron, always great catching up with you on these conversations. You have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you very much. You have a wonderful day too.
Thank you. Aaron Ngambi, a geopolitical analyst, giving us analysis of the stories making headlines in the Central African region of our continent. It's 6:30 Central African time. That means time for news headlines. Here's Dwalani Tulo Mwebe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, the South African National Defence Force has announced that its first group of soldiers who were deployed to the eastern DRC will finally come home tomorrow. The Sudanese army says it has retreated from the Libya-Egypt-Sudan border triangle area. The section is now under the control of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. And finally, the US has cited security concerns as the reason for evacuating non-essential staff from its embassy in Baghdad, Iraq. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time to take a first look at what's been happening in the world of sport. And at the sports desk this week, it's Fikile Lingwati. Good morning, my brother.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. Good morning, guys. Let me start off with what's happening in Lords. That's cricket. The decision by Themba Bavuma to bowl first on the morning of day one of the ICC World Test Championship final against Australia at Lords in London paid off. However, hard work lies ahead for the Proteas' remaining batters. The defending champions were bowled out for 212 in the first innings inside 57 overs. Proteas' two prima fast bowlers, Kagiso Rabada and Marco Jansen, took 8 wickets between them, with Rabada finishing with figures of 5 for 51 in 15 overs and 4 deliveries. Rabada's 17th 5-wicket haul in his 71st test took his tally to 332 scarps in his career, going ahead of Alan Donald's 330-wicket mark. Rabada has more.
I guess to be named in that list, of bowlers is special. As a player growing up and representing South Africa, I've been inspired by those who've come before and seen, what they've done on the big stage. And as a kid, I was inspired, to want to do the same thing. So to be listed in that list of names is something special, and long may it continue.
Rabada says the ball was nipping quite a bit and at times moving off the slope quite a lot, but he still feels like batters could get in.
Yeah, 212, you take that. We thought probably 160 is what we should have had them at, but that's just the way the game goes. Right now, 40 for 4. Not the start we're looking for, but there's still a lot of cricket to be played in this test match. But I still felt like batters could get in. If you just bowled well and got more balls in the right area for a long period of time, then that's when you could create chances. But again, with this ball, hopefully we can score some runs.
Now, football news. Former Mamelodi Sundowns captain Hlompo Kekana believes current coach Miguel Cardoso remains the right man to win the club's second CAF Champions League title. The Portuguese mentor has fallen short at the final hurdle on 2 successive attempts. First, with Esperance de Tunis last year, when they lost to Al Ahly, and then earlier this month, the Sundowns suffered defeat at the hands of Pyramids FC.
But when I look at the overall performance over this year already, I feel like he has done enough. He has done enough to put even the team into the Champions League final. I think they for me, I think they deserve to win that final, if you'd ask me. But that's how the football goes. That's how football works.
And now golf news. Rory McIlroy says his recent loss of form has helped him realize he needs to get his stuff together at this week's US Open after struggling for motivation following his career-defining Masters win. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fire Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa, meet Beda.
Yeah, that's me.
Beda is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Beda and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's say good morning for the first time on Africa Rise and Shine on this Thursday to Thabiso Lehuku as he brings us our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. South Africa's Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Professor Beda Nzimande, says there is a need to have science and technology forums at provincial and local level. Nzimande has further highlighted the need to strengthen existing relationship with the global science experts to develop and strengthen engineering in South Africa. He was leading a South African delegation participating in the second Ministerial Belt and Road Science and Technology Conference in Chengdu, China. Nzimande explains.
Well, the meeting with the Chinese Academy, the Chinese Association of Science and Technology, is that we were strengthening relations that it has already established, for instance, with our Council for Natural and Scientific Professions, which is our engineers and so on. They already have got joint programs to develop engineering science and strengthen engineering science in South Africa, because engineering, by the way, is not only important in its application, it's also important in terms of new ideas, innovation.
South Africa's Umkhonto weSizwe Party has opposed the report of the Standing Committee on Finance that recommends the general fuel levy increase that kicked in earlier this month. The committee's report about fiscal framework and revenue proposals was debated by the National Assembly yesterday. MK Party MP Des van Rooyen describes the report as the Government of National Unity proposal.
It is in this report, Madam Speaker, that the ANC, TA, FF+, IFP, Action SA, and other so-called GNU beneficiaries agreed that the majority of our people must be subjected to high fuel levy, to the insane personal income tax. Parliament Finance Committee and research think tanks advise that hiking fuel levy is the most regressive taxation system, far worse than VAT. It will increase food costs and compromise the country's food security efforts.
State-owned rail transport and ports management company Transnet says it is introducing new innovative ways of manufacturing, refurbishing and maintenance of ports equipment in order to diversify its manufacturing capabilities. The South African company says it's on a drive to reposition itself as a manufacturing and refurbishment business, focusing on port and maritime-related equipment such as port trailers, haulers and locomotives. Transnet Engineering, Manufacturing and Maritime Manager Tshwanelo Tshwai was speaking at Transnet's engineering plant in Salt River in Cape Town.
For instance, the hauler to us is new. We've always bought haulers for the other ODs, ODs bought haulers for themselves. But this one we've built internally from design, from scratch. And that hauler is currently, as I said, is in testing. And that hauler will be deployed soon once all testing has been completed.
Glencore has declared force majeure on some deliveries of cobalt from Democratic Republic of Congo days after the government suspended exports of the battery material. Congo, the world's largest cobalt-producing country, introduced a 4-month ban on all cobalt exports in February in an attempt to curb a supply glut that helped send prices to 9-year lows and stifled its tax revenues. As a result of the ban, London-listed Glencore took the rare step of declaring force majeure on some supply agreements for cobalt produced at its Congolese operations, invoking a measure meant for unforeseeable circumstances that prevent a contract's execution. The rate of inflation in the United States edged up last month in line with analysts' expectations. Prices went up by 2.4% compared to May last year. When he was campaigning to be president, Donald Trump promised to bring down prices on his first day in office, as the BBC's Michelle Fleury reports.
Businesses had warned that prices would increase because of President Trump's tariffs, but new data shows the impact on inflation has been limited, at least for now. Prices actually fell in some key areas expected to feel the impact, like clothing, which dropped 0.4% in May. New cars also saw price declines. Economists say higher tariffs may still push inflation higher in the months ahead as businesses clear out existing stock.
$1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 443. Botswana 13.23. Kenya 128 shilling 474. And Zambia 24 kwacha 88. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar will cost you 5 riyal 55. Russia 78 rubles 96. India 85 rupees 48. China 71.19. And in South Africa, the dollar will cost you 17 rand 71. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Gold is trading at $3,337 and platinum $1,264 per ounce. Brand crude oil $69.41 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Thabiso Lohoko.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
Right, let's take a look at your G20 fact for today. The G20 consists of 2 parallel tracks, which are the Sherpa and Finance tracks. The Sherpa track consists of working groups that are focused on socio-economic issues such as agriculture, anti-corruption, climate, digital economy, education, employment, energy, environment, health, tourism, trade and investment. And the finance track, well, that's headed by finance ministers and central bank governors, and they relate to fiscal and monetary policy issues such as the global economy, infrastructure, financial regulation, inclusion, and IFA and taxation. And that is your G20 fact for today.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
6:44 Central African time it is here on Africa Rise and Shine. If you've just joined us, a very good morning to you. We're coming to you live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. Staying in South Africa, this is our next story now, where the death toll linked to the storm that hit South Africa's Eastern Cape province is currently sitting at 49. The OR Tambo area of the province has been hit the hardest. Residents of Dekolini in Mthatha area are the worst affected. Houses in the location were submerged in water, with residents trapped inside their homes. Fundi Swamhlekude reports.
The floodwaters was devastating at Dekolini. Houses were fully submerged. Some victims were found clinging to trees, but not everybody made it out alive. A resident, Siponkende, narrates what he saw.
There were thunderstorms accompanied by heavy rains last night, and nobody knew what happened. When we went outside, we found the situation like this. We took our phones to alert each other that people and vehicles are being swept away. We came in numbers to rescue people who were clinging onto trees and rooftops. We are still doing that.
A school bus carrying 13 learners, a driver and his conductor was swept away while crossing a bridge. It is reported the learners are from Jumba Senior Secondary School in Tabase outside Mthatha. A distraught parent came to search for her child with the hope that she will be found alive.
I am a parent of one of the learners who are inside that bus. I stay in Slovo on the way to Highbury. I'm trying to be strong for other parents with children inside the bus, as I am also finding it hard to be strong. I don't know what we will do. I thank the other parents who are here to give us support. We will have to deal with this. We have no choice.
Rescue teams came all the way from East London to assist, but the weather played havoc with the rescue operations. With the help of community members, rescue teams continued the search this morning, finding more of the dead. Here is one of the devastated parents who was there to identify her son's body.
I found my child. Even though he is not alive, I am happy that at least we were able to find his body. I had already braced myself for the worst because I had no hope that he would be found alive. Finding your child's body is important so you can find closure. I sent my child to school so he can change the situation at home.
Many families have been left destitute. Affected residents are accommodated at community halls and local schools. Some of the survivors of the freak floods, Bukeka Notulumba and Tembisa Zwagala, are happy they lived to tell the tale.
I was saved by God's mercy because I had to break the window open in order to come out of the house, as the water was already waist high. When we got out, the water was now shoulder high. The reason we did not see that the water got inside is because we do not have electricity and it was dark.
Local government MEC Zolile Williams believes the flooding of homes could have been avoided if people did not disregard zoning regulations.
Communities are still disregarding building regulations, bylaws and zoning schemes of municipalities. So we would want to appeal to communities to please follow the law, follow the bylaws, because the rush to construct houses in places that are not properly zoned is a rush to the bottom, because those houses, we must definitely look at their condition and remove them.
Provincial Premier Oscar Mabuyane says plans are afoot to ensure the disaster-prone eastern part of the province has the essential resources to deal with any eventualities. The death toll is expected to rise as the search efforts continue. Fundiswa Mhlekude, Mthatha.
The 2025 Nelson Mandela International Day has been launched with a call to tackle poverty and fight inequity. Mandela Day is an annual global celebration which is held on July the 18th to honor the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela. This day serves as a call to action for individuals, communities and organizations to take time to reflect on Mandela's values and principles and make a positive impact on their own communities. Nhlanhla Mahlangu reports.
The Nelson Mandela Foundation has launched Mandela Day 2025 with a call to action under the theme, "It's still in our hands to combat poverty and equity." The foundation's CEO, Dr. Mbongiseni Buthelezi, says they are rallying individuals, organizations and communities worldwide to take a stand for justice and make a lasting impact where they are.
What's important for us is that it's not just about a single day. The work that day seeds, the incredible way in which it brings people together. It's not about just doing something for that one day. What's important for us is that what that day does in bringing people together is it makes connections for you to then, and for us to all take things forward that get sparked as we walk together, as we run together on that day. So that it's not just making a difference for one day. It's making a difference that lasts. And we heard that word used several times already, sustainable change. We hope that that's what Nelson Mandela Day is used for. It sparks change. It's the beginning, sustainable, that we create together out of that day.
One of the key events for Mandela Day is the annual Mandela Day Walk and Run, set to take place on July 19 at the DP World Wanderers Stadium in Ilovo, Johannesburg. The event is expected to attract 10,000 participants and will feature a 5-kilometer walk along with a 10-kilometer and 21-kilometer runs. Supported by BP South Africa, Baldwin Properties and partners including Mahindra, this year's gathering promises to be one of the most thrilling Mandela Day events yet. BP Southern Africa representative Eva Khoza says this event embodies the values of unity, resilience and active living that Madiba championed.
This walk and run reminds us of our responsibility to be a force for change. It is an initiative that goes a long way to playing an important part in the wellness of the collective society, but also to improve the physical and mental health through running and walking. I'd like to encourage everyone to say, let's continue to push ourselves to make a positive impact in the communities where we stay and create a better South Africa for all.
Ryan Kalk from Baldwin Properties says they are honored to be part of the Mandela Day Walk and Run, an event that embodies the spirit of unity, service and community upliftment that Madiba championed.
Nelson Mandela once said, "Sport has the power to change the world, has the power to inspire, it has the power to unite the people the way little else does. If we all do our small bit to make a difference, we can fulfill Madiba's dream of leaving a lasting positive legacy for South Africa."
Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Nhlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Africa Day Lecture. South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, says the pandemic agreement, which was signed last month in Geneva, Switzerland, is a landmark achievement for global health governance in Africa. Motsoaledi was speaking at the first day of the 4th G20 Health Working Group, or HWG, taking place in the city of Johannesburg until Friday. The meeting, which enters its second day today, has gathered global health experts discussing pandemic preparedness. Tutongobeni compiled this report.
The 4th G20 Health Working Group meeting taking place in South Africa's city of Johannesburg this week has gathered health leaders, experts and policymakers from the world's largest economies with the main focus on pandemic preparedness. Other critical topics to form part of the discussions during this week-long meeting include sustainable financing and equitable access to novel tuberculosis vaccines and research and development diagnostics. South Africa's Health Minister, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, says the newly signed pandemic agreement is a landmark achievement for global health governance and Africa.
Since its formation, this is only the second time that a treaty or agreement was made which is legally binding. The only other treaty since 1948 is the Framework Convention of Tobacco Control, of around 2005-2002. It was supported by all countries to control tobacco around the world. Now this is the second one that's going to be legally binding, and it was adopted, but of course pending the finalization of what is called PAPS agreement, pathogen access and benefit sharing. Meaning what? A pathogen is the organism that causes diseases. Now, because these are infectious organisms, you find them in mostly poor settings, especially on the African continent.
Key in the pandemic agreement is the pathogen access and benefit sharing, which enables global surveillance, risk assessment, and the research and development of pandemic-related products. The sharing of related benefits is also seen as key to ensuring more equitable global access. As Dr. Motsoaledi says, this will benefit the country where the pathogen came from.
Now, companies and scientists used to move from the global north, the developed countries, come to Africa, take the pathogen, study it, and make a medicine or a vaccine, which Africa doesn't have access to. But the pathogen that led them to that medicine came from Africa. So pathogen access and benefit sharing means there's going to be an agreement finalized as part of this pandemic agreement, whereby if the pathogen is taken from your country, there must be a benefit that accrues from that. For instance, the proposal is 20%, that if a pharmaceutical company and its scientists get the pathogen from your country, go to produce a vaccine or some therapeutic product, they must give a 20% share, 10% which goes to World Health Organization to help poorer countries, and the other 10% to the country that has produced the pathogen.
Al-Halabi, World Health Organization representative to South Africa, says through this agreement, countries will be well supported to prepare for future pandemics, which she says that the development of capacity, while also highlighting the role of financing, will enable this process.
Now needs to happen is actually the domestication, the operationalization of the pandemic agreement, making sure that the PAPS annex is also addressed. It's really critical because we want to make sure that countries are well supported to actually prevent, prepare and respond to future pandemics. And so for us as WHO, it's important that we support member states in the implementation and operationalization of this pandemic agreement.
Some of the expected outcomes from the meeting include G20-backed commitments to fund and implement joint action plans on antimicrobial resistance, establish global standards for climate health risk preparedness, and scale up technical support for vulnerable regions. For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Bene in Johannesburg.
Zochitika ndi madaphiri kamlondola wazochitika pena paliponse.
Nduna wa zamalonda ku Malawi aletsa kampani yopanga shuga ya Ilovo yomwe ndi nthambi ya Ilovo Sugar Group Limited kuti isiye kutumiza shuga ku maiko akunja. Malingana ndi nduna ya zamalonda Vitumbuko Mumba, izi zithandiza kuti shuga yemwe yakusowa pa msika azipezeka. Ndiye pano ndili ndi George Muhangu amene ali mu mzinda wa Blantyre mu dziko la Malawi. Chimene chikupangitsa kuti shuga azisowa ndi chani?
Chomwe chikupangitsa kuti shuga azisowa ndichonena kuti panopo ili ngati off season ya makampani a Ilovo Sugar Malawi, kunena kuti sakutha kupanga shugayi okwanira chifukwa akukolola. Ndiye akamaliza kukolola pameneno atayambeno sopano kugaya shugayi kuti azipezeka. Chinanso ndichonena kuti ma distributors amene akumakagula shuga kaya ndi ku Ilovo kaya ndi kusalima shuga akumagulisa ku maiko akunja ngati Zambia, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Mozambique.
Zochitika ndi madaphiri lolemba mpaka lachisanu pa nthawi ya 7 koloko kufikira 8 koloko madzulo pa Channel Africa. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Right, it's a little bit before 7 o'clock Central Africa Time, and taking you back in history, some notable events took place today. On June the 12th, 1964, Nelson Mandela and 7 other ANC leaders were sentenced to life imprisonment for sabotage against the apartheid regime. The trial followed the Rivonia arrests and was a defining moment in South Africa's liberation history. Mandela delivered, of course, his famous "I'm prepared to die" speech during the trial. And another notable event, in 1960, the independence of the DRC, Congo-Kinshasa nowadays, is celebrated throughout June. But on June the 12th, 1960, that marked the swearing in of Patrice Lumumba as Prime Minister. This in anticipation of the official independence date, June the 30th. So significant days in history. Nelson Mandela and 7 others sentenced to life in prison. And Patrice Lumumba, of course, his life was cut short soon after his swearing in as Prime Minister on this day in 1960.
Thank you for that. And that brings us to the next hour of Africa Rise and Shine. It's 7 o'clock Central African time. A very good morning to you on this Thursday, the 12th of June. If you've just joined us, well, you've caught the next 2 hours of the show. Lots to cover coming up in this hour. And of course, you can get in touch with us on our social media platforms. We are across the different platforms of X, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and what's the other one? YouTube. At Channel Africa 1 is the handle. We're everywhere. You can find us there. It's time for our news, though. Here's Jolani Tulongwepe. Following her will be sports headlines with Fikile Lingwati.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. The South African National Defence Force has announced that its first group of soldiers who were deployed in the eastern DRC will finally come home tomorrow. The SANDF has been part of the SADC mission in Congo to restore peace and security in the eastern region. At least 19 soldiers from South Africa, Malawi and Tanzania were killed when the M23 rebels captured the region's biggest city, Goma, in January. Amid international calls, the SADC leaders resolved to withdraw the mission to give peace talks a chance. Kayelihle Kumalo has the details.
The withdrawal of the SADC mission in the DRC has been conducted in a structured manner to ensure the safe return of South African troops and their military equipment. It's been a delicate process as they travelled with their armaments from Goma and Sake in eastern DRC via Rwanda to Tanzania in Chato, which has been designated as the assembly point. They are expected to arrive at Air Force Base Bloemspruit in Bloemfontein, and the estimated time of arrival is 12 midday on Friday. The troops will be welcomed by the Defence and Military Veterans Minister, Angie Motshekga, alongside the members of the Military Command Council.
The Premier of South Africa's Eastern Cape Province, Oscar Mabuyane, has blamed lack of resources for the high number of fatalities and devastating floods that hit the province this week. The death toll is currently sitting at 49. The OR Tambo region is the hardest hit with 39 fatalities. Mabuyane says they have 1 helicopter to respond to all emergencies.
I'm saying this because it's a point that we have been articulating and making each and every time we are experiencing disaster, whether we talk about fighting crime. The point that we've been making and the submission that we've made even nationally is for the additional resources, with understanding that prevention is better than cure. This province can't have 1 chopper that is based in Nelson Mandela, because our experience is that when the weather is terrible, helicopter cannot take off. So immediately we've got a helicopter that is Nelson Mandela is equal to none. It's not there. It's non-existing.
Deputy Director General at the National Health Department in South Africa, Dr. Anban Pillay, says the 100 Days mission is important for global health security. The 100 Days mission focuses on global collaboration ahead of time for effective interventions which will be made across the world within the first 100 days of a pandemic threat. Pillay was speaking at the 4th G20 Health Working Group meeting in Johannesburg, where world leaders and policymakers are discussing pandemic interventions happens this week.
It's a bit like an orchestra, so there's different parts that need to come together. When we have an outbreak, we would need to identify the pathogen and what we describe as characterize it. In other words, understand its structure and how does it affect body systems. Then we need to understand how could we best interfere with its ability to harm us. And then we design a vaccine based on that, or a drug. So once the characterization happens, those that develop vaccines, we need to quickly work in the lab and put together a vaccine that disrupts its ability to harm us. Or somebody who's developing a drug needs to do that.
The Sudanese army says it has retreated from the Libya-Egypt-Sudan border triangle area. The section is now under the control of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The army on Tuesday accused troops loyal to Eastern Libya military commander Khalifa Haftar of carrying out an attack alongside the RSF. Haftar's forces denied participating in a cross-border attack. The BBC's Will Ross reports.
This is a big setback for the Sudanese army. It had been using former rebels from Darfur to help it protect the border with Libya, but following fighting this week, they've now withdrawn and the army's rival, the Rapid Support Forces, control the border triangle. This means it'll be far easier for the RSF to bring in weapons via Libya and link up with the Libyan military commander Khalifa Haftar's forces. The Sudanese army says the United Arab Emirates is behind all this. Despite denials from Abu Dhabi, there's strong evidence that the UAE has backed the RSF and Khalifa Haftar's forces.
And finally, the US has started to evacuate some staff and their families from its embassy in Iraq, as well as military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. It's due to security concerns. American officials are reportedly been told that Israel is ready to launch an operation against Iran. The BBC's Tom Bateman has the details.
It is now 2 weeks, in fact, since President Trump said he was giving Tehran 2 months to comply with what he wanted in those talks designed to try to stop the Iranians developing a nuclear weapon. Now, these partial evacuations are significant, but they may also be designed to put some pressure on the Iranians in those talks. There has been some tense conversations between President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has always favoured a military rather than a diplomatic path when it comes to the US and Iran.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jorani Tulo Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In our sports headline, Africa's football's governing body has postponed the WAFU Under-20 tournament indefinitely. The well-rested Scotty Scheffler is the clear favorite when the US Open begins at Oakmont Country Club. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Tensions remain high in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where Goma continues to reel from escalating violence and political uncertainty. The head of the UN mission in the DRC, Bintou Keita, arrived in the city this week for a round of high-stakes meetings, including a controversial sit-down with Cornel Nanga, who's a political coordinator of the rebel-aligned AFC M23 coalition, which now holds sway over parts of the North Kivu province. Now, Keita's visit, which also includes talks with civil society groups, women's associations, and the SADC regional force, comes as diplomatic efforts falter and confidence in MONUSCO's presence has been dwindling. So what does this visit actually mean for local peace prospects and the region's volatile future? Well, for more, we're now joined on the line by Channel Africa correspondent in Goma, Jimmy Shukrani. Jimmy, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Jimmy, set the scene for us. What's the security and humanitarian situation in Goma right now, especially in the light of recent developments?
Yes, thank you so much. Since the M23, IFC M23 is in Goma, there's a humanitarian situation At first of all, it was deteriorated because the a non-government organization was not working as well as due to wars and other conflict recorded in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. But some months after the situation was being restored, and some NGOs began just to work not only in Goma but in other territories and other entities which are under controlled or which are overtaken by the M23. And right now we can confirm that there is no great deterioration of humanitarian situation because the whole entities controlled by the M23, they are just, maybe we can say they are trying to be secured by the forces which has overtaken the North Kivu and the South Kivu province, because before that there were a lot of groups of Wazalendo who just according to M23 leaders came to destabilize the security and the carried of population. But right now there is some changement. It's not 100%. We cannot confirm that, but there are some cases which are reported in these areas. But right now we can confirm that there is a situation which is happening on the ground, and maybe this is trying to ensure the population that it will be one of the solutions. So according to the humanitarian, the authorities of Alliance Fleuve Congo and M23, they are trying to improve the manner of working of NGOs because they didn't cross the whole villages and the territories under control, because we have trying to see the Doctor Without Borders trying to travel to Goma and until to Masisi, to Goma, to Ruchuru. They leave Ruchuru, they come in Goma. When there is a cases, we are trying to see after the war. Another thing where our listeners and must know is because the World Food Program has just begun to accompany the displaced who returned in their origin village. So that's to show the degree where the humanitarian situation is trying to be improved. At this time, we can say there is some strength which are just put in place in order to help those who are in need. The help after the war, just to be to find that aid in collaboration with many NGOs working in the North Kivu province.
Tell me a little bit about this meeting that Bintu Keita had with Cornel Nanga. It's raised a few eyebrows. What are the implications of the UN engaging directly with a figure aligned with M23, and what message do you think it might be sending?
Yes, as you know, the UN in DRC is called MONUSCO, the mission of the United States in DRC. MONUSCO just say it has a great role just in conflict here in DRC since 2001, when Joseph Kabila, the former president, retired to the regime in the 2001. The MONUSCO has just a great role of trying to find a resolution to the conflict recorded in Congo since 1997 until now, because there are North Kivu was a region which recorded a lot of armed groups, which until now they are trying to destabilize the security of the people. So, Bintu Keita in Goma, it's a great sign. It's a great sign which shows maybe the restoration of peace, or the turnment of things, because she's the one who was implicated the strength just to find a solution to the conflict in the eastern part of the DRC, and she emphasized this since the M23 began just to fight against the Congolese army in 2021, when the M23 began by occupying some areas in Ruchuru, like Bunagana. Bintu Keita showed very on high at the international community that in eastern part of the DRC there is a great problem, a problem of insecurity. So reason why the international community must put the strength together in order to fight against this insecurity. His presence in Goma for this situation, it means there is a role which the United States or the MONUSCO must do something just in order to help maybe the Congolese government or the Alliance Fleuve Congo, which is fighting against the government of Congo, just to find a solution, because the MONUSCO sometimes have a great relation with two parties. You have to know that when the IFM 23, the military of M23 have retired in Goma, the MONUSCO's element just still in Goma until now. And when the CCR and the MONUSCO trying to repatriate some politics, and Fardeses and Wazalendo who were in Goma, you understood it last month, the MONUSCO was assisting that activities.
Right.
So that is mean they know very well what's the problem, and they have to contribute on high just in order to find a solution and to help the government of Congo to understand this question and to find a great solution in order to make that peace everlasting and large peace can be found in the region. So the coming of Bintu Keita means that the MONUSCO has just a great role of trying to make a solidarization between the party in conflict. And you remember that she's coming someday after Joseph Kabila, the former president, and is the President Kabila who just initiate the coming of the MONUSCO's forces here in Goma. This is mean there is maybe a solution which can be found in this period.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there, Jimmy. Always good talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for your updates.
Thank you so much, Beda.
And that's our correspondent, Jimmy Shukrani, who's in Goma there, covering that story. Bintu Keita, the head of the UN mission in the DRC, visiting the area at this time.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Botswana is leading the way in eliminating mother-to-child transmission of HIV. According to the World Health Organization, the country has been validated by the world body as the first high HIV burden country in the world and the first in Africa to reach the WHO's gold tier status for eliminating mother-to-child transmission of HIV as a public health issue. Sisi Sikhalo has more on the story.
The World Health Organization says the validation is a reflection of more than 2 decades of committed leadership, innovation and strategic partnerships to combat one of the world's most persistent epidemic. According to the 2024 UNAIDS Spectrum estimates, Botswana has about 360,000 people living with HIV, with 98% of pregnant women living with HIV receiving treatment. As a result, the rate of mother-to-child transmission has dropped to just 1.2%, well below the 5% benchmark, and fewer than 100 infants were born with HIV in 2023. The World Health Organization explains what they were looking for to be able to award Botswana with such a status. The Bogomatiti Malo is the cluster lead for communicable and non-communicable diseases at WHO Botswana.
They are set targets that the countries, according to every criterion, that the countries have to work towards. Like for impact indicators, there has to be a certain number of births of less than 5, for example. The annual rate of new pediatric infections per 100,000 has to be less than 500, and we have to demonstrate that over a period of minimum 3 years. And likewise, for the process indicators, you have to demonstrate coverage of your services in antenatal care. Your HIV testing rates among pregnant women has to be more than 95% and demonstrated over a period of time as well. And all these other, for HIV and syphilis, also have their own impact and process indicators that have to demonstrate that your coverages for program for syphilis testing is actually above 95%. You have the requisites policy document in place and are current and are being implemented. And likewise for hepatitis B virus.
The Botswana Ministry of Health admits the achievement is as a result of hard work, political will, and community and civil society involvement. The National Coordinator of the Prevention of Mother-to-Child Transmission Program, Jessica Mafasitswalo, says they also had to deal with achieving the reduction in new pediatric infections, ensuring their babies are born without HIV, and encouraging women to consult health facilities as soon as they're suspecting pregnancy and doing all the relevant tests, including HIV. She elaborates further on the work they had to do.
All our pregnant women in the country that are tested for HIV, and those who are positive, they are immediately put on treatment. And then we make sure that we also look at the pregnant and both the pregnant and breastfeeding women. We make sure that they are tested, and if they are positive, then they are put on ARV. And another thing, we make sure that all our healthcare workers, we are doing mentoring and supervisory visit. We make sure that we improve service delivery through the continuous quality improvement, which is actually done by the focal persons across the district. One of the most important things also is that we really use data. We make sure that our data is we are data-driven approach, whereby we make sure that there's utilization of robust monitoring and evaluation system so that it informs the program on how we can improve everything.
The Botswana Ministry of Health would not have achieved the recognition from WHO had it not been without the partnership with civil society organizations, traditional and religious organizations. The national coordinator of the International Network of Religious Leaders living with or affected by HIV and AIDS in Erela, Botswana, Edna Maine, says political will also played an important role.
The NGOs were doing community engagement, and we had behavior change programs which helped in increasing access to HIV prevention and treatment, care and services. And the other thing that really helped was the engagement of the religious leaders and the traditional leaders in the country, because this thing was rooted in the primary health care. We really wanted to reach each and everyone through the primary health care because we knew we would reach quite a number of people through that. And reaching the religious leaders and the traditional leaders who address the underlying causes such as poverty, MTCT programs, and testing and PrEP. So we really went all out through the support of NAPA, which was under the Ministry of the State President, which was led by President Festus Mogae by then.
For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekgalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
All right, Kenyan President William Ruto has condemned the death of 31-year-old Albert Ojwang while in police custody, urging transparency and prompt investigations into the matter. The incident has resulted in criticism of the Kenyan police, who have faced numerous allegations of human rights abuses, including the crackdown on activists, enforced disappearances, and etc. Let's play a video, and we're going to chat about this particular story, looking at an overview of human rights activists and how they've been treated in recent days, as well as public outrage in terms of the treatment and enforced disappearances of some activists from Kenya. This video by human rights activist in Kenya, Wanjeru Ndoro.
This is difficult. I do not know where to begin. But I am very broken. Broken not just for this nation, but for the family of our comrade, Ojwang. Watching his father gives us a representation of what is happening in very many families across Kenya, where they have lost their loved ones, their children, either from being disappeared, enforced disappearances, or outright murder. Some bodies have never been found. We can't quantify how many Kenyans we have lost. And that look on his face, I know that look. It's a look of disbelief. It's almost like you're in a dream state, like you don't believe what is happening to you is actually happening. Not trying, your brain is trying to understand what could be going on. I know that look because I saw it on my parents when we lost my sister Wajiro in 2010 after a sudden illness. And that look and feeling doesn't go away. It doesn't. And this is happening to very many families across Kenya right now. The state is killing its children with impunity, zero regard for human life, zero. We don't matter. Our lives are nothing to these people. As long as they can still keep to their powerful spaces and their big offices and their helicopters and their watches and their red-bottomed shoes. They don't care about the rest of us. Kenya, we need a reset, a complete reset.
Let's get reaction then in terms of what we've just heard and watched. If you are live streaming with us on Rise and Shine, from Kenyan government spokesperson Isaac Mwaura. Isaac, thank you for joining us. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning.
Let's talk first. I don't know if you heard in terms of that video by human rights activist in Kenya, Wanjeru Ndoro. There is public outrage in the country in terms of how activism is being cracked down on, as it seems, from the eyes of the public. Your response to that video?
I don't think so. I don't agree with that Wanjeru person. I think that is just evoking a lot of emotions and trying to talk as if the country is burning. Of course, possibly posturing for Western donors. That's not the case. I completely dissociate myself with that kind of sentiment from such a person.
Let's talk about Albert Omondi Ojwang, who died in police custody at a central police station in Nairobi. 5 police officers are indicted. As far as our introduction was saying, the president now has spoken for the first time in terms of this particular incident, where there was also a public outrage. The offence is said to have been false publication or defamation for him to have been in police custody in the first place. What do you know about how true those allegations were?
Yeah, that's what we know so far. And from the government's stand is that we will make sure that there is justice that is brought to book. The police who are been allegedly suspected for having done this, there will be investigations by the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPO as we call it here, and so action shall be taken, and already action has already been taken to a certain extent, And we really condemn as a government this action. It's not acceptable. It doesn't matter whether somebody has been defamed or not, but that cannot cost lives. So possibly these are overzealous police officers who really, went out of their way, in their quest to do what they thought was right. But it is wrong. It is actually wrong. It's unacceptable. But then we leave that now to the investigators so that they can, IPOA, so that they can actually give us a true account of what is happening. Already yesterday there were parliamentary proceedings and hearings at the Senate, and a lot was revealed. So we also see a way to see what Parliament, which is an independent arm of government, will conclude on the submissions, even as the criminal investigations are launched.
In terms of, as you speak of responses, the President has acknowledged that there is growing public concern over the conduct of police forces, and has reaffirmed the government's commitment to ending unconstitutional and abusive practices by law enforcement. As it stands in terms of activism in Kenya, can activists continue in their search for freedom, for liberation and transparency in governance, in terms of what the President has said, and what's the response been from the President in terms of addressing and making sure that the Kenyan people do feel that there isn't a clampdown on activism?
There is every intention to ensure that every Kenyan is given the right to express themselves freely, but also to be responsible. And the President has made this commitment in his remarks yesterday, and that is the government position. Over and above that, there are some people of the civil society who really have become activists just for the sake of it, in terms of it's just some kind of activistocracy. Because why am I saying so? I have participated with them. I even recently was a chief guest in one of their functions, but they couldn't even allow me to speak. They were just shouting everything down. Those are not people who are there for it. They are there for politics. They are there for the showmanship, and they should be separated completely. From the idea that they can think that they will be able to drag the country down just because they are anarchists. So I condemn them actually personally, because they are not necessarily representing the wishes of Kenyans. They are in the business for the sake of it.
Yeah.
But then every Kenyan has a right to freedom of expression. That is a guarantee in Chapter 4 of the Constitution of Kenya. And that remains to be the position of the government. And that we will not relent in doing. And that is why we are saying whatever has happened is unacceptable. And we really, as a government, send our most sincere condolences to the family, relatives, and friends of Albert Omondi Odiong, who has passed on. That is not really something that we can condone, and action shall be taken. However, we also want to say, because we have seen reactionary forces around the civil society and even our political competitors taking advantage of this to settle political scores, and of course to posture as the ones who are guarantors of human rights and fundamental freedoms. But yet we know very well they are innate for the business of it. So that one we must also call out.
Isaac, when can we expect results from that investigation? As you say, the Independent Policing Oversight Authorities continues with investigations on this particular case of Mr. Ojwang.
I think I'll leave that to the chair of the IPOA. He will go to the country.
What is the President saying in terms of the time frame he's given them to give us answers?
No, there is nobody who can dictate the timeline, because that is subject to investigations, and they take a little bit longer. But of course, it will be done as quickly as it is possibly.
All right, as quickly as possible. Thank you so much. We'll leave it on that note.
Yes, exactly.
Isaac, thank you again for joining us on Rise and Shine. Isaac Mwaura is Kenya's government spokesperson. 32 minutes, or it's 33 minutes past 7 now, Central African time. Good morning to Jwalani Tulongwepe with news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Good morning. Making headlines, the South African National Defence Force has announced its first group of soldiers who were deployed in the Eastern DRC will finally come home tomorrow. South Africa's Basic Education Minister, Siviwe Gwagube, says support for learners and plans to repair damaged infrastructure in the Eastern Cape province has started. This after severe floods affected the schooling of more than 6,000 learners. More than 70 schools were damaged. And finally, the US has cited security concerns as the reason for evacuating non-essential staff from its embassy in Baghdad in Iraq. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, it's time for the world of sport, and always on top of his game is Figile Lingwat.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Once again, let's kick off with football news. Africa's football's governing body, CAF, has postponed the WAFU Zone A and B Under-20 tournament to a later date that has not yet been disclosed. According to LFA, Liberia Football Association, media manager Anthony Kokoi, the postponement led to the immediate disbandment of Liberia's Under-20 squad, which had been in camp since the 6th of June at the George Weah Technical Center in Carisburg. CAF has not yet given an official reason for the decision. The lack of clarity has left participating countries uncertain about the next steps, as most had already begun final preparations for the regional competition. Liberia had been drawn in Group A alongside host nation Ghana, Togo and the Gambia. The WAFU Under-20 tournament is widely viewed as a key pathway for young West African players aspiring to transition to senior national team roles. Interim Bafana Bafana coach Vela Khumalo has lamented his side's poor finishing in the COSAFA Cup after watching them fail to convert chances during their goalless draw against Mauritius. The Bafana Bafana B side advanced the last four as Group A winners thanks to a superior goal difference after finishing level on 4 points with Zimbabwe and Mozambique. Having only scored 2 goals in 3 matches, Khumalo has called for improvement in Friday's semi-final.
Mauritius, they gave us a good assignment to work on. We couldn't break them. They played low block and they wanted to play from set places, standard situations where they wanted to hit us. We were well aware of that. But I think what has always been the problem with us since the beginning of the tournament was not being clinical. We're not scoring goals. We create those chances. We get the entries in the final third. We stretch them. We go inside, we go combinations. But the one thing that we're not doing well is scoring the goals. So,
cricket news, the decision by Themba Bavuma to bowl first on the morning of day one of the ICC World Test Championship final against Australia at Lord's in London paid off. However, hard work lies ahead for the Proteas' remaining batters. The defending champions were bowled out for 212 in their first innings inside 57 overs. Proteas' 2 prima fast bowlers Kagiso Rabada and Marco Jansen took 8 wickets between them, with Rabada finishing with figures of 5 for 51 in 15 overs and 4 deliveries. Rabada's 17th 5-wicket haul in his 71st test took his tally up to 332 scalps in his career, going ahead of Alan Donald's 330-wicket mark. Rabada has more.
I guess to be named in that list, of bowlers is special. As a player growing up and representing South Africa, I've been inspired by those who've come before and seen, what they've done on the big stage. And as a kid, I was inspired, to want to do the same thing. So I guess to be listed in that list of names is something special, and long may it continue.
Let's end with golf news. That is, Scottie Scheffler may not have been as prepared as he could have been for last year's US Open, but the tournament favorite at Oakmont Country Club says he's well rested and has done his homework ahead of golf's toughest tests. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport. With me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Remo Framo e João Yabalá.
O surto da cólera em Angola tem causado grande preocupação, afetando já mais de metade das províncias do país. Simultaneamente, a Agência dos Estados Unidos para o Desenvolvimento Internacional, USAID, um dos maiores doadores mundiais de assistência humanitária, decidiu não priorizar os países com maior incidência de malária. Para discutirmos as causas do alastramento da cólera em Angola e os impactos dessa decisão da USAID, convidamos o Dr. Jeremias Agostinho, médico e mestre em saúde pública, para partilhar a sua visão sobre o tema.
A doença, nesse momento, representa o maior risco de saúde pública que nós temos. Nos últimos anos, a nossa preocupação esteve sempre centrada com os casos de malária, os casos de tuberculose e também de infecção por VIH-Sida. A forma como, em pouco menos de 2 meses, os casos de cólera vêm aumentando, acaba por representar, nessa altura, um dos maiores desafios que o país tem. É expectável que, nesta fase, o número de casos venha a aumentar.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio do Canal África.
Bringing you the energy, news and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's check in with the world of business now as we say good morning to Tabiso Lehuko. He's got our business news.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. South Africa's Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, has expressed relief that the process of adopting the 2025 fiscal framework is now out of his hands. This after both houses of parliament adopted the framework yesterday. Godongwana only succeeded in tabling a budget on a third attempt after discontent over his proposed value-added tax increase in the previous 2 budget proposals. He reminded MPs of their responsibility to ensure that the budget was properly implemented.
But you can't fault the budget. Don't fault the budget. 409 billion rand is going to spend on the transport infrastructure over the next 3 years. You can't fault this budget. If it's not spent properly, that's your duty as members of parliament to do your oversight. That's your duty.
Meanwhile, the Umkhonto weSizwe Party has opposed the report on the Standing Committee on Finance that recommends the general fuel levy increases that kicked in earlier this month. The committee's report about fiscal framework and revenue proposals was debated by the National Assembly yesterday. MK Party MP Des van Rooyen described the report as a government of national unity proposal.
It is in this report, Madam Speaker, that the ANC, TA, FF+, IFP, Action SA, and other so-called GNU beneficiaries agreed that the majority of our people must be subjected to high fuel levy, to the insane personal income tax. Parliament Finance Committee and research think tanks advise that hiking fuel levy is the most regressive taxation system, far worse than VAT. It will increase food costs and compromise the country's food security efforts.
South Africa's Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Professor Beda Nzimande, says there's a need to have science and technology forums at the provincial and local level. Nzimande has further highlighted the need to strengthen existing relationship with global science experts to develop and strengthen engineering science in South Africa. He was leading a South African delegation participating in the 2nd Ministerial Belt and Road Science and Technology Conference in Chengdu, China. Nzimande explains.
Well, the meeting with the Chinese Academy, the Chinese Association of Science and Technology, is that we were strengthening relations that it has already established, for instance, with our Council for Natural and Scientific Professions, which is our engineers and so on. They already have got joint programs to develop engineering science and strengthen engineering science in South Africa, because engineering, by the way, is not only important in its application, it's also important in terms of new ideas, innovation.
Glencore has declared force majeure on some deliveries of cobalt from Democratic Republic of Congo days after the government suspended exports of the battery material. Congo, the world's largest cobalt-producing country, introduced a 4-month ban on all cobalt exports in February in an attempt to curb a supply glut that helped send prices to 9-year lows and stifled its tax revenue. As a result of the ban, London-listed Glencore took the rash step of declaring force majeure on some supply agreements for cobalt produced at its Congolese operations, invoking a measure meant for unforeseeable circumstances that prevent a contract's execution. Oil prices have urged higher to their highest in more than 2 months after U.S. President Donald Trump said U.S. personnel were being moved out of the Middle East, which raised fears that escalating tensions with Iran could disrupt supply. Brent crude futures rose 15 U.S. cents, 0.2% to $69.92 a barrel, while U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude 22 cents, 0.3% to $68.37. Both Brent and WTI surged more than 4% to their highest since early April on Wednesday. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 543, Botswana 13.23, Kenya 128 shilling 474, and Zambia 24 kwacha 88. The BRICS countries in Brazil, the dollar there will cost you 5 real 55, Russia 78 rubles 96, India 85 rupees 48, China 71.19, and in South Africa the dollar will cost you 17 rand 71. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Gold $3,376, platinum $1,264 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $69.41 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Thabiso Lohoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
7:45 Central African time it is, and you're still with us on Rise and Shine, Asanda, Beda and Peter Ndoro. Let's look into this story now, which we touched on yesterday, but just getting more and other angles to it. The International Labour Organization's World Day Against Child Labour is being observed today to highlight the plight of children engaged in child labour and is intended to serve as a catalyst for the growing worldwide movement against child labour. Worst forms of child labour include sexual exploitation and trafficking. To speak to us about the significance of this day, we're joined on the line by Beda, who is director at Save the Children South Africa. Megan, thank you for joining us. Welcome to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Thank you so much. Good morning.
So as I said, I mean, we had this conversation yesterday with UNICEF, a representative from UNICEF, but we understand that there was a study conducted by you guys, not you guys, sorry, the International Labour Organization as well as UNICEF, and now we get a perspective from Save the Children South Africa. But yesterday in our chats, we cited some examples of how children can be involved in child labour and the sectors that are most prevalent. Mentioned in amongst those was agriculture, and I think it was domestic work, if I remember correctly. Yeah. In your experience, what are you seeing the sectors being that are notorious for notoriously known for employing children?
Absolutely. So I think agriculture is definitely the standout, and particularly because it's seasonal. So, you know, whenever there's harvesting, more labor is needed, and you do tend to see children drawn in, and because it's cheaper to use children. And of course, domestic work. So the challenge there is, you know, it's very long hours. It's very hidden because it's usually within a person's home. So it's very hard to identify and root out these situations. And in South Africa, we definitely see street trading and the more informal work. So hawking, car guarding, and a lot of children involved in recycling. So we have a lot of squatter camps that have developed around our big dumps. And in those settings, you will see children collecting materials for recycling. And of course, sexual exploitation and trafficking is the worst form and the most, underground that we know.
Do we have estimates in terms of figures of children involved in child labor? As you say, it's difficult to tally because, as you say, in the industries that these kids are employed in, they would be hidden.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we can always say there's lots of studies that have been done, but we always call them our guesstimates, and they range from 5% to 17%, and that's for children 5 to 14, because we need to remember that from 15 upwards it's looked at you can legally work in South Africa. So these are the children that are underage and should not be actively working within the sector.
What effects does child labor have on children, especially those who are in sexually exploited sectors or labor and even trafficked?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I mean, any kind of extreme violations of rights, such as sexual exploitation of young people, will lead to both physical and mental health issues, particularly anxiety and depression. And we definitely know that young people drawn into sexual exploitation are exposed to substance abuse, so drug addiction. We know those that are trafficking them use these substances to keep young people, controlled. So I think those are your biggest. But I think very importantly, just generally in child labor, our biggest challenge is the educational setbacks, as children are forced to try and balance access to school as well as working. And this is seen a lot more where it's family businesses. So you're trying to help your parent in their business. You have an expectation maybe to be in the shop, the spaza shop, for example, a certain amount of time during a day or a week. And this then sets these young people back in their education.
So how do we really differentiate then between a child helping out in a family business and them being involved in child labor, which is not what they're supposed to be doing? As you say, as parents, we might want our kids to learn how to run the businesses that we have, or just to even, educate them in terms of how they need to take care of themselves later in life. So where do we draw the line?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a life skill, and we do want to see our children understanding and valuing work. But very importantly, it's when one outweighs the other, and there's normative behavior or ways that we know children should be behaving or the way they should be experiencing life. So we know that the majority of their day should be focused on attending school, engaging with friends in play. Those are their key activities, really, as children under 15. So as soon as one supersedes the other, and what you're seeing is a child is now in the shop or in the field more than is the norm, then we have a problem. So I think, that's the way you balance it. If my child should be at school for 5 hours a day, they shouldn't have to also work for 5 hours a day. If they're helping me on a Saturday for an hour or two in a shop, that's a different story. That's participating within my family environment.
Interesting for me is I was watching a documentary yesterday. We have a world where we live in social media, and there's a thing called kidfluencers on social media who are children. And these kids are encouraged by their parents to either post videos of themselves dancing or maybe posting toys and their favorite things. And they're making money out of this. Would that be something that is regarded as well as child labor?
Absolutely. It's a new area that we're all trying to navigate, but it can be looked at in many circumstances as exploitation, especially if the family's deriving a significant income from that child. There have been cases that have been taken to court, not really in South Africa, but internationally, where it's become very clear that family is becoming, when families become dependent on the income that the child is generating, you then know you have a problem. Because again, that often takes away from the child, and just that exposure online, we need to also talk about and think about the risks that children are placed under the more they're exposed, online.
Talk to us about some of the work that Save the Children is doing within this regard, and globally what we need to do to end or combat child labour.
Absolutely. So at Save the Children South Africa, our first focus around child labour is, of course, advocacy, and we need to ensure that our country has the correct legislation in place. In the amendments to the Children's Bill, we have recommended some changes specifically around defining what is hazardous work, so that we're clearer with regards to ability to take action if we think children are being exposed. So we would always be at that level, being the voice for our children, where we believe children's rights are violated. But very importantly, we're also there to receive reports or concerns, and to make sure that these are channeled into the right spaces, and that action is taken when any child is at risk. Internationally, what is essential is that we really focus on the SDGs. Its goal 8.7, I think that focuses on issues of child labour and addressing issues of supply chain. So we might be sitting here happily drinking our coffee or eating our chocolate, but we need to be asking, how was that produced? And was it produced ethically? And in that chain, were children exploited? And that's the awareness that we need, and that's why we need to deal with it as an international issue, because we all link to each other.
Absolutely. Megan, thank you so much again for your time, and have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you so much. Thanks very much.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Megan Beda is director at Save the Children South Africa, talking to us about child labour.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Statistics South Africa has poured water on suggestions that there is something wrong with how it measures unemployment. This after the CEO of one of the country's big five banks said a big part of the economy was left out, making the country's unemployment rate among the highest in the world. But Stats SA says this is misleading. Timakadzo Lishoro has the details.
The remarks come after outgoing chief executive of one of South Africa's largest banks, Gerrie Fourie, says the country's high unemployment rate would be around 10% if self-employed people and those employed in the informal sector were counted. South Africa's unemployment rate increased to 32.9% in the first 3 months of this year, according to data by the country's stats agency, Statistics South Africa. It showed that while unemployment increased in the formal economy, 17,000 jobs were created in the informal sector over the same period. Trade, Industry and Competition Minister Pax Dau told Parliament on Tuesday that there's an argument to be made about how the unemployment numbers are calculated.
But I also hold the view that there is a significant undercount, particularly if you take into account the informal sector. And in fact, it's something that we should all collectively be engaging in resolving, so that we're able to one, acknowledge the informal sector, but also reinforce the support mechanisms for what is a major contributor to employment in the country.
His Deputy Minister, Zuko Godlimpi, says something is statistically flawed with the accounting matrix by Stats SA.
The President and I made a similar point as what the CEO is saying. We didn't quite suggest that it should be a 10% thing, but we were making the point that there is something conceptually flawed with South Africa's statistical accounting matrix. Part of the reason why South Africa is known as having the highest level of unemployment compared to many other countries where the reality should be far worse, is because we use a different statistical framing of what employment is. Now, of course, that approach has its own discontents, and it has been discussed at length with respect to other countries such as Nigeria and Mozambique and so on, about whether or not it doesn't overstate the importance of informal sector employment in determining the structural profile or functionality of an economy.
But Statistics South Africa has rejected these views, saying its numbers are beyond reproach. Resenga Maluleke is the Statistician General.
To suggest that our unemployment rate is sitting as low as 10% would be misleading the nation in the space of unemployment and underemployment, which remain challenges to our nation. We have to indicate to the nation that we stand by the methods that we use to collect and publish our labor market statistics. They are solid.
Former Statistician General Dr. Padile Hohla says this is madness.
Nowhere in the world what he says would be correct, even what we do to measure. They are comfortable in aggregating black misery and exploiting it and come with this kind of trash as measurement in order to allow politicians to hang up behind this rubbish. What statistics is that? It's immoral. They are politicians and they are opportunistic and they rely on this nonsense. They have a statistician general in the country. They have a series that has been compiled from 2007 on a quarterly basis, a series that was every 6 months before 2007. And at one stroke of a random businessman, they want to undermine measurement and theory of a nation. That's madness. It's very unflattering that we had to buy into that nonsense.
The government has not been...
Eight o'clock Central African time. It is a very good morning to you if you've just joined us as we enter the third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. This is Channel Africa. From the African perspective, we bring you the news that you need to know. My name is Asanda Beda and I'm with Peter Ndoro.
Yes, indeed. Thanks so much indeed for this. Joining us for this third hour. www.channelafrica.co.za is where we broadcast from live across the globe and across the continent. And we got quite a packed last hour. An interesting subject that I'm going to be exploring just now is in Nigeria, young girls still don't imagine women in politics. And it really talks a lot about gender stereotyping and the way children are socialized from childhood, that there is no great expectation actually for women in politics. We'll be exploring that a little bit in this next half an hour. Fascinating, and I think it's something that resonates not just in Nigeria but in many parts of the continent, sadly. All right, coming up first, the news though with Jolani Tulongwefe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. The first group of South African National Defence Force soldiers deployed in the eastern DRC is expected home tomorrow. The troops have been part of the SADC mission in Congo to restore peace and security in the eastern region. At least 19 soldiers from South Africa, Malawi, Tanzania were killed when the M23 rebels captured the region's biggest city, Goma, in January. Amid international calls, the SADC leaders resolved to withdraw the mission to give peace talks a chance. Kaeli Hlai Kumalo has the story.
The withdrawal of the SADC mission in the DRC has been conducted in a structured manner to ensure the safe return of South African troops and their military equipment. It's been a delicate process as they travelled with their armaments from Goma and Sake in eastern DRC via Rwanda to Tanzania in Chato, which has been designated as their assembly point. They are expected to arrive at Air Force Base Bloemspruit in Bloemfontein, and the estimated time of of arrival is 12 midday on Friday. The troops will be welcomed by the Defence and Military Veterans Minister, Angie Motsecha, alongside the members of the Military Command Council.
South Africa's Basic Education Minister Siviwe Gwagube says support for learners and plans to repair damaged infrastructure in the Eastern Cape province are underway. This comes after heavy rains swept through the province, resulting in devastating floods that killed 49 people, including learners. More than 70 schools were damaged, ruining schooling for over 6,000 learners. Gwagube says resources are being mobilized at national level.
I also had briefed the President about the matters, particularly surrounding the scholars that were killed in that accident and those who are still missing. So I do believe that due to the scale of the tragedy, we will be able to at least mobilize national resources to come and descend upon this district.
Deputy Director General at the National Health Department of South Africa, Dr. Anban Pillay, says the 100 Days mission is important for global health security. The 100 Days mission focuses on global collaboration ahead of time for effective interventions which will be made across the world within the first 100 days of a pandemic threat. Pillay was speaking at the 4th G20 Health Working Group meeting in Johannesburg, where world leaders and policymakers are discussing pandemic interventions this week.
It's a bit like an orchestra, so there's different parts that need to come together. When we have an outbreak, we would need to identify the pathogen and what we describe as characterize it. In other words, understand its structure and how does it affect body systems. Then we need to understand how could we best interfere with its ability to harm us. And then we design a vaccine based on that, or a drug. So once the characterization happens, those that develop vaccines, we need to quickly work in the lab and put together a vaccine that disrupts its ability to harm us. Or somebody who's developing a drug needs to do that.
The Sudanese army says it has retreated from the Libya-Egypt-Sudan border triangle area. The section is now under the control of the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or RSF. The army on Tuesday accused troops loyal to Eastern Libyan military commander Khalifa Haftar of carrying out an attack alongside the RSF. Haftar's forces denied participating in a cross-border attack. The BBC's Will Ross reports.
This is a big setback for the Sudanese army. It had been using former rebels from Darfur to help it protect the border with Libya, but following fighting this week, they've now withdrawn and the army's rival, the Rapid Support Forces, control the border triangle. This means it'll be far easier for the RSF to bring in weapons via Libya and link up with the Libyan military commander Khalifa Haftar's forces. The Sudanese army says the United Arab Emirates is behind all this. Despite denials from Abu Dhabi, there's strong evidence that the UAE has backed the RSF and Khalifa Haftar's forces.
And finally, the US has started to evacuate some staff and their families from its embassy in Iraq, as well as military bases in Kuwait and Bahrain. This is due to security concerns. American officials have reportedly been told that Israel is ready to launch an operation against Iran. The BBC's Tom Bateman has more.
It is now 2 weeks, in fact, since President Trump said he was giving Tehran 2 months to comply with what he wanted in those talks designed to try to stop the Iranians developing a nuclear weapon. Now, these partial evacuations are significant, but they may also be designed to put some pressure on the Iranians in those talks. There has been some tense conversations between President Trump and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has always favoured a military rather than a diplomatic path when it comes to the US and Iran.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo-Webe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Our sports headline. Kagiso Rabada urges Proteas batters to combat Australia's pace trio on Lord's pitch. And Zimbabwe's senior men's team played to a 1-1 draw against Niger in an international friendly. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Wake up, Africa. Beda Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
Now, despite years of advocacy for women's political representation, a new study shows that many Nigerian children still don't imagine women as political leaders. Now, the research, co-authored by Nigerian and American scholars, reveals how early gender stereotypes are shaped in schools, homes and communities, and how these perceptions could limit women's future political participation. To unpack some of these findings and understand how political socialization in childhood shapes views on leadership and gender, we're now joined by Dr. Adebusola Okedele, who's a principal lecturer and dean at Sikiru Adetona College of Education, Science and Technology in Nigeria. Now, she's a gender studies scholar with a keen interest in women's participation in politics, as well as being a co-author of the recent study. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Good morning.
Dr. Okedele, tell us briefly about the motivation behind the study. What were you and your colleagues hoping to uncover?
All right, thank you. Looking at the political landscape in Nigeria, what we actually started off with was thinking there's so many, there are just a few women on the political landscape. And we felt beyond having just a handful of women as political leaders, do we think this would have an effect on what children think? So we decided that, okay, we could, carry out a study to find out what children think about political leaders. When they imagine political leaders, what comes to their mind? Is it men? Is it men? Is it women? What comes to their mind? Then apart from that, a similar study had been carried out in the US. So we felt, let's try to replicate this study in the Nigerian context and find out if we're going to have similar results or a different result. So that was actually what motivated us to carry out this study.
So what stood out for you the most in the responses from Nigerian children when they were asked to imagine or draw political leaders?
Yeah, most of the children drew men as political leaders. In fact, our survey was conducted on over 900 children, boys and girls, between ages 9 and 16. And we found out that 98% of the boys drew a man political leader, while 92% of the girls drew a woman political leader. So in all, only about, say, 5% of the students, of the children drew a woman political leader. So in essence, we had a majority of the children drawing men as political leaders.
So this study suggests that children as young as 5 associate leadership with men. What could be the early influences driving this perception in their minds?
Yeah, it's actually based on the things they say around them, what we call the ways that they get socialized. If you look at, like I said earlier, if you look at the political landscape in Nigeria, or maybe let me just go back a little. What we actually told them to do was, we told them to imagine a political leader, what the political leader does on a typical day. And when the children had to use their own imagination, and majority of them came up, drawing a male political leader. So it's a pointer to the fact that, to the way they are socialized, the kind of things they see, the kind of things they hear their parents discuss, the kind of things they hear on TV and all that. And one thing is that was actually, our study was carried out just around February, when Nigeria was, between January and February in 2023, when Nigeria was preparing for the general elections. And at that moment, a lot of political activities were at stop there and all of that. So, the things they were seeing around them tilted more towards, more political leaders. And that, to a large extent, informed, what they had in mind about what a typical political leader would look like.
So I wonder, how do schools, textbooks and the media in general in Nigeria contribute perhaps to reinforcing these gendered ideas about leadership?
Yeah, if you take, after that our study, we also thought about this, and we went back to some of the schools to get some of the textbooks that they use, in schools and all that, and we still found out that, in those textbooks, when they talk about nationalist leaders, when they talk about political leaders, you find out that most of the images in these textbooks are actually images of male or men. And then when they talk about people in business, people, taking care of the family, most of the time what you see is pictures of, women. So to a large extent, the things that these kids are taught in school, of course, I'm not saying that they are not taught about, women political leaders or women nationalist leaders and all that, women or heroines and all of that. But to a large extent, when political leaders are depicted in books, they always are often depicted as male, the male figures as men and all of that. So it kind of, gets stuck in the minds of these young children.
Did you find any regional, religious, or even socio-economic differences in the way that children perceive male and female leaders?
Well, we did not. Our study did not really, look into that. So I won't say that we found anything, because that will be, untrue, because we do not have data for that.
Do you think parents, teachers even, are aware of the impact of their own language and behavior in shaping some of these biases?
I don't think they are. Even parents are not. I don't think they are aware, because, at times, like I said, we had our study was carried out when Nigeria was preparing for, elections and all that. And, that would have been a time that parents would be discussing a lot of politics, in the home, and children will hear all of this. So parents and even teachers do not seem, to realize the impact that their discussions or their attitudes about politics have on these children.
So, I mean, what do you think needs to happen then? I mean, do we retrain teachers, educators? Do we conscientize policymakers maybe to promote more inclusive ideas of leadership from an early age?
Yes, it's important to do that. When we talk about trying to increase women's participation in politics, most of the time we focus on let's increase quotas for women and all that. There's also a need, to sensitize even to the local and even to the lowest of levels. Every hand has to be on deck, in schools, policymakers, people that design the curriculum, teachers, even parents. There has to be a wide, sensitization on these issues, so that people understand that leadership is not just something that is for men. So that even in religious spaces, in schools, when curriculum, books are going to be designed and all of that, all these things, are put into consideration, such that indirectly people do not, begin to project ideas or thoughts or opinions that will be counterproductive to having more women, occupy political leadership positions.
Is there a role for current female leaders in changing perceptions? And I'm asking this because when they do step up, it's not always very easy. There's this story, of course, of Senator Natasha Akpoti Uduaghan, who raised the issue of sexual harassment, and it became a story of persecution in the end. And it seems as if when women do want to stand up, it's very difficult and they face obstacles, and this probably puts other women off. And yet it's women in leadership that perhaps can set an example. Can you see the challenge? And I just wonder what can be done.
Yeah, there's actually a challenge. It's actually a challenge. And aside this study, I actually did a personal study that focused on women legislators sometime last year. And this was one of the challenges, identified. So it's actually a challenge. But despite that, there's this saying, when there's the will, there's the way. Despite the challenge, if you look at, say, 50 years ago, even though we still say that we do not have so many women, in politics and all of that now, 50 years ago, the situation was, worse, but things are getting better. So I would say that despite the challenges, women politicians, women leaders should not relent. They should not, give up. They should try everything they can to sail through those challenges and know that they are doing that not just for themselves, but for generations coming behind.
All right, and perhaps finally, is there anything that gives you hope? Any signs that things can change and change is possible?
Yeah, I know change. It's possible that things will change. Things will definitely get better. Like I said, like a century ago, if you talk about women's rights, women in political leadership, things were not the way they are now. So just let's give it time with, every hand being on deck, the right policies in place, everyone playing their roles. With time, it might take time, but someday, somehow, things will get better for women in political spaces.
Dr. Adebusola Ogedele, thank you so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us on this fascinating study. And let's hope that we are more conscious as a collective in changing some of these perceptions. Thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you too. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Adebusola Ogedele, who's the Principal Lecturer and Dean at Sikiru Adetona College of Education, Science and Technology in Nigeria.
Africa, voici Abedi.
Oui, c'est moi.
Abedi est un passionné de musique dans l'âme. Il a un goût pour toutes sortes de musique et passe ses journées à écouter Channel Africa.
J'aime beaucoup la musique africaine.
Ok. Devinez quoi? Channel Africa veut aider Abedi et les mélomanes du monde entier à découvrir encore plus de musique incroyable. C'est pourquoi Channel Africa appelle les artistes africains à soumettre leur musique. Chers artistes, n'oubliez pas de nous fournir toutes vos informations pertinentes à l'email adresse musique@channelafrica.co.za. Les soumissions sont votre chance d'être entendues, mais elles ne garantissent pas une playlist. Toutes les soumissions seront soigneusement examinées pour voir si elles répondent aux exigences de notre station. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mukwena@sabc. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African perspective. June is Youth Month in South Africa. Celebrate Africa's young voices with us. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
The South African National Defence Force says the first group of its soldiers who were deployed in the eastern DRC will return home tomorrow, that's Friday. They were part of a SADC peace mission. The troops were sent 2 years ago to support the Congolese army fight the M23 rebels and other groupings which had seized control of large parts of mineral-rich eastern DRC Congo. SADC withdrew the mission after the ambush in Goma City by the rebels that killed 19 soldiers from South Africa, Malawi and Tanzania. Now we're joined on the line by the South African National Defence Force spokesperson, Prince Chabalala. Prince, a very good morning to you and thank you for joining us on Africa Rise and Shine.
Good morning to the Rise and Shine viewers.
We appreciate your time. Let's start about logistics. Can you brief us on that in terms of the return of these soldiers?
All I can say is that all our logistics are in place. We have flights that will be taking soldiers from Tanzania, and then they would be landing at Air Force Base Bloomspruit on Friday. And as far as the setup in preparation of their demobilization process, everything is well organized, is in order. We are prepared to receive the soldiers. They will be welcomed by Minister of Defense and the members of the Military Command Council of the SNDF. So we are in place with all logistics as far as we're concerned.
The troops have been in Goma since December of 2023. As we say, it's expected that they're going to be touching South African soil tomorrow. Do we know how they're doing health-wise, their health conditions?
Their health conditions is quite fine, and so far they will undergo what we call the process of demobilization. We have in place our medical psycho-support teams that are in place that will ensure that they are evaluated. They go through our own administrative process as per regulations in terms of the National Defence Force, that when we are coming back from any military mission, you go through that process. So we will do that normal standard routine of the mobilization process, where they will be debriefed and also receive psycho support in terms of the medical and to ensure that they are fully integrated back into the National Defence Force and to their families.
The number of soldiers that are coming back, do we know exactly how many there are? We know it's the first group.
The total, we are talking over about approximately over, I would easily say, over 2,000. And that is the number that hence we are talking about more of sorties which will be going in and out the country from Tanzania to back to South Africa.
And in terms of the kind of assistance that will be provided to the soldiers, what will they be doing as they now come back into the country, and what is the SANDF going to help them do?
Remember, these are soldiers. They are professional soldiers. We expect them to fully recover from the battle and then integrated into the National Defence Force and then continue with the assignment that they used to do. We train to fight, and we fight as we train. That is our motto, and that's what we do as a defence force. And because we are professional soldiers, so it is important to note that these are professional, disciplined soldiers. So they are going to be going through all the processes for demobilization. Then after that, once they've recuperated and integrated fully, then they are back into the service and do what is expected them to do to continue to serve the country with pride and dignity.
As it is the first group of soldiers that are returning, do we know when the second or third groups will return to South Africa?
We will announce to the public accordingly through our media releases because we don't want to be framed within a specific time frames, but we will let the nation know when the next group will be arriving accordingly. But it's suffice to say that there will be a number of sorties that are coming in and out, and then hence the media briefing that we have planned to divulge all the details pertaining to this operation that will be chaired by the Minister of Defense at Tempe at 44 Para Regiment. And so we are inviting the media to listen to the full details of the briefing.
19 soldiers from South Africa, Malawi and Tanzania were reported to have been killed in the DRC. Do we know as far as support to the families of those deceased, what's happened there?
Remember, South Africa, amongst the 19, South Africa had received the most fatalities, which is 14 members. And we have provided support to the family. We are continuing to provide the support to the family in terms of our psycho support. And those families are part of us now as a community. And last week we had they were part of our honor in commemorating the United Nations International Day, where we invited the same families that lost their members during the battle in DRC as part of the mourning people that we honored with them, the fallen heroes of our country.
All right, so we don't have time frames in terms of the complete withdrawal of South African troops from the DRC, as you say, Admiral. So we'll have to...
let me put it on record to say, suffice to say, our plans are in place to complete the withdrawal by the end of the month.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there for now then, and I guess we continue monitoring the story and making sure that there is a safe return of our SANDF soldiers. Admiral Chabalala, thank you again for your time and joining us here on Channel Africa.
Thank you.
That's Rear Admiral Prince Chabalala talking to us about the return of South African soldiers to the country. They're coming home tomorrow, that is Friday, and in terms of... the rest of the soldiers coming back into the country will have to stay tuned in terms of media reports from the SANDF, the South African National Defence Force. But by June, tentatively, they should be returned safely home. Well, as you've just joined us, well, thank you for doing that. Do get in touch with us on our social media platforms at Channel Africa 1 is our handle. Across those various platforms, we'll be going into our news headlines in just a bit. It's the 12th of June on this Thursday. If it's your birthday, a happy birthday to you. Just so you know, you share your birthday, some famous birthdays for today. George H.W. Bush, the 41st U.S. president, born in 1924. He died in 2018. Also sharing a birthday with you is Anne Frank, that Dutch diarist and Jewish victim of the Nazi Holocaust, who was born in 1929. She died in 1945. Also sharing a birthday with you is former South African rugby player Brian Habana. He was born on this day in 1983. I didn't know he was so young.
He was such a good player, though, wasn't he? Brilliant.
He is. I guess he still is.
Yeah. So 1990, guess what happened? Russia declared its sovereignty from the USSR. The Russian Federation, the Russia that we know today, formally declared its sovereignty from the USSR, and today is marked as Russia Day, which is a national holiday in the country.
All right.
Maybe we should try and get the Russian ambassador to talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, let's get our news headlines right now, though. Here's Dwelani Tulongwebe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter and Asanda. Making headlines this hour, the first group of South African National Defence Force soldiers deployed in the eastern DRC is expected home tomorrow. The troops have been part of the SADC mission in Congo to restore peace and security in the eastern region. Kenyan government spokesperson Isaac Mwaura says they condemn the actions that led to the death of blogger Albert Ojwang in police custody. Ojwang was hit on the head and his death was likely to have been caused by assault, according to a post-mortem. And finally, an uneasy calm has descended over Los Angeles as U.S. Marines prepare to deploy to the city. This comes after nearly a week of protests and riots over the Trump administration's immigration raids. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time now for your sport, and I was wondering what we were going to do this summer in terms of football, because there's no World Cup, no Euros or anything like that. But then I remembered it's the World Club Football Championships, and it's big and it's amazing, isn't it? Figile Lingwati, who brings us the sport.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, it's big and it's better this time around. More teams are involved. So it is a mini World Cup in a way. Let's start off with football. Zimbabwe senior men's team played a 1-0 draw against Niger in a friendly match played at Stade Perejego Stadium in Morocco. Zimbabwe fielded a new look of the first 11, different from the one which played Burkina Faso. Magesi FC goalkeeper Elvis Chipezeze made his debut under coach Michael Nies. Youngster Jonah Fabich and Tawanda Macheke also enjoyed starting berth in the Warriors lineup. Desperate to redeem themselves from Friday's 2-0 defeat against Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe managed to find the back of the net in the 9th minute, thanks to Gerald Takwara, who tapped in from the 6-yard box. The Warriors made several efforts to cushion their lead, but they failed to break Niger's defense and thus went to the break leading 1-0. Tavaviva failed to record a clean sheet on debut after conceding from the spot in the 71st minute as Niger equalized. The draw is the 5th for Michael Nies, who marked his 10th game in charge of the Warriors. And Africa's football's governing body, CAF, has postponed the WAFU Zone A and B Under-20 tournament to a later date that has not yet been disclosed. According to Liberia Football Association LFA media manager Anthony Kokoi, the postponement led to the immediate disbandment of Liberia's Under-20 squad, which had been in camp since the 6th of June at the George Weah Technical Center in Carisburg. CAF has not given an official reason for the decision. The lack of clarity has left participating countries uncertain about the next steps, as most had already begun final preparations for the regional competition. Now, cricket news. The decision by Themba Bavuma to bowl first on the morning of day one of the ICC World Test Championship final against Australia at Lord's in London paid off. However, hard work lies ahead for the Proteas' remaining batters. The defending champions were bowled out for 212 in their first innings inside 57 overs. The Proteas' two prima fast bowlers, Kagiso Rabada and Marco Jansen, took 8 wickets between them, with Rabada finishing with 5 figures of 5 for 51 in 15 overs and 4 deliveries. Rabada has more on his performance.
I guess to be named in that list, of bowlers is special. As a player growing up and representing South Africa, I've been inspired by those who've come before and seen, what they've done on the big stage. And as a kid, I was inspired, to want to do the same thing. So I guess to be listed in that list of names is something special, and long may it continue.
And in golf news, it is Scottie Scheffler, who may not have been as prepared as he could have been for last year's US Open, but the tournament favorite at Oakmont Country Club says he is well rested and has done his homework ahead of the golf's toughest test. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Hi there. Do you want to elevate your business and give it a voice in South Africa and Africa as a whole? Well, in that case, let Channel Africa make this a possibility. Channel Africa is willing to advertise your business for as little as 30,000 rands or $1,719.18. To get access to these great rates, send all requests to mokoenata@SABC. That's MOKOENATA@SABC. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of business for this particular hour. The latest here is Tabiso Lihuku.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and good morning. The General Manager of South Africa's rail company, Transnet Engineering, Tshwanelo Tshwai, says the company was concerned about the state of infrastructure in the country owing to vandalism. Tswai, however, commended Transnet's role in driving Africa's industrial agenda with a strong focus on regional collaboration and localized manufacturing. He made the remarks during a media tour hosted by Transnet Engineering in the city of Cape Town.
Well, vandalism, I think it's a country problem currently. We looking at many different ways in terms of, let's say, for instance, we have the, as a plant, there could be people coming under always, storm drains coming into our plants. In Kudesport, they do the same. Ours is to make sure that the security is in order.
South Africa's Finance Minister, Inoko Dongwana, has expressed relief that the process of adopting the 2025 fiscal framework is now out of his hands. This after both Houses of Parliament adopted the framework yesterday. Dongwana only succeeded in tabling a budget on a third attempt after discontent over his proposed value-added tax increase in the previous two budget proposals. He reminded MPs of their responsibility to ensure that the budget was properly implemented.
But you can't fault the budget. Don't fault the budget. 409 billion rand is going to spend on the transport infrastructure over the next 3 years. You can't fault this budget. If it's not spent properly, that's your duty as members of parliament to do your oversight. That's your duty.
Kenya's finance minister will present a budget today aimed at boosting revenues to service debt while avoiding tax measures that triggered the kind of deadly protests that rocked East Africa's biggest economy last year. President William Ruto's administration has been struggling to narrow the fiscal deficit and govern under a heavy total debt to gross domestic product ratio of around 2/3, well above the 55% level considered a sustainable threshold. The government is seeking new sources of funding after last year's countrywide protests forced it to pursue austerity measures and scrap planned tax hikes worth more than $2.7 billion. Glencore has declared force majeure on some deliveries of cobalt from Democratic Republic of Congo days after the government suspended exports of battery material. Congo, the world's largest cobalt-producing country, introduced a 4-month ban on all cobalt exports in February, in an attempt to curb a supply glut that helped send prices to 9-year lows and stifled its tax revenues. As a result of the ban, London-listed Glencore took the rare step of declaring force majeure on some supply agreements for cobalt produced at its Congolese operations, invoking a measure meant for unforeseeable circumstances that prevent a contract's execution. Global stocks and the dollar slipped as investors sized up a burning U.S. inflation report and the fragile trade truce between Washington and Beijing. This as rising tensions in the Middle East and lingering tariff anxiety dented risk sentiment. Attention in financial markets this week has been on the U.S.-China trade talks, which culminated in a framework agreement that would remove Chinese export restrictions on rare earth minerals and allow Chinese students access to U.S. universities. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 443, Botswana 13 pula 23, Kenya 128 shilling 474, and Zambia 24 kwacha 88. The BRICS countries, I'll start in South Africa. $1 here will cost you 17 Rand 71. In India, 85 rupees 48. China, 71.19. And in Brazil, the dollar will cost you 5 real 55. In Russia, 78 rubles 96. $1 is trading at 73 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Commodities markets now. Gold is trading at $3,376 and platinum $1,264 per ounce. Brent crude oil is at $69.41 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business in Johannesburg, I'm Tabisolo Hoku.
Business News. on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
G20 country health leaders took part in a simulation exercise during the 4th G20 Health Working Group meeting taking place in Johannesburg, South Africa. The exercise is meant to stress test global readiness for a pandemic scenario. The meeting's focus is on pandemic preparedness following the COVID-19 pandemic that caught the world unprepared, with low and middle income countries facing challenges of accessing vaccines. Tutongo Beni is attending this week-long meeting and has compiled this report.
The 4th G20 Health Working Group meeting taking place in South Africa's Johannesburg city with the aim of ensuring that the world is pandemic-proof when another pandemic hits has gathered health leaders from G20 countries. On Wednesday, a simulation exercise was held meant to stress test global readiness for a pandemic scenario. The session was through a dynamic scenario-based format to identify critical bottlenecks in mobilization, deployment, and equitable access to medical countermeasures. The exercise also explored supply chain gaps, emergency regulatory challenges, deployment logistics, and access barriers, especially in low-resource settings, helping shape coordinated responses and inform future G20 and global strategies for pandemic preparedness. Naren Ram, Policy Director at the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, or CEPI, says as CEPI they ensure that countries that are in need of vaccines are able to access it by bringing the manufacturing process closer.
So at the heart of what CEPI does is ensuring that those who need a vaccine have access to it. So it's not just about speed. We have failed in our mission if we cannot ensure that people have access. So it's no use developing a vaccine or a medical countermeasure at speed and then it sits on a shelf while patients across the world are dying and don't have access. So how do we address that challenge? So the first is, as I've said, bringing the manufacturing processes closer. Another way in which we address that is that when we invest in medical countermeasures, we invest in vaccines, we have provisions in those contracts that compel the partner that's receiving funding from CEPI to provide those access to those vaccines in the global south and to provide them on an affordable basis as well. So we do make an effort to do that. But for us to succeed, all funders across the world, because CEPI is not the only funder of R&D, there are many funders and most of those are governments. We all need to work together to ensure that in all our funding contracts, we have those terms. Then only will you see a change in the access landscape. We will begin to see such a change. So we refer to systems equity. Systems equity is a term that applies when all partners work together towards that common goal of ensuring that all patients receive access.
Ram says apart from ensuring the manufacturing means of vaccines in the low to middle income countries, he says they work with other partners in delivering these life-saving treatments.
So in addition to us using contractual means, manufacturing means, we also ensure that when we invest in technologies, that those technologies are suitable to the global south. So if you're experiencing extreme temperatures in Africa, will that vaccine work? Or is it a vaccine that's going to require such low temperatures that you can't transport it easily in Africa? So we look at thermostability and those types of characteristics. We also work with partners to ensure that where CEPI does not work on delivery of vaccines, those partners are able to do that. And those partners include Gavi, UNICEF, the World Health Organization.
Some of the topics being discussed at this meeting include equity in, for, and through pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. Deputy Director General at South Africa's Health Department, Dr. Anban Pillay, says this meeting's main focus is preparing for future pandemics post the COVID-19 pandemic and how the world can plug the gaps in areas that need improvement.
This working group meeting is about pandemic preparedness. Member states are here to discuss post-COVID. We've learned a number of lessons about how we should respond to a pandemic. How far are we in terms of those lessons, in terms of preparedness as the world to respond to a new pandemic? What we've discussed is what are all the gaps globally that we need to plug If we were to have another pandemic tomorrow, where are the areas that we all need to improve?
Dr. Pillay stressed the importance of political heads being part of these engagements in order to avoid countries being caught off guard because of lack of funds.
That's why it's important that political heads of countries participate in this discussion, and that's for health. It's going to happen in November. And so we're hoping then to get some agreement about what kind of support low and middle income countries will have, particularly on the African continent, but also in other continents as well. There needs to be a clear mechanism that they have. So because at that point, you can't have a country scrambling around looking for money. It'll be too late.
Meanwhile, a new era of global pandemic preparedness has been birthed through the newly signed World Health Organization Pandemic Agreement that will hopefully be a tool of international health law that sets out the principles, approaches, and tools for better international coordination across a range of areas in order to strengthen the global health architecture for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. For Channel Africa News, I am Tutongo Bene in Johannesburg.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
All right, let's take a look at this story now. The General Manager of Transnet's Manufacturing and Ports South Africa, Mr. Tshwanelo Tswai, says that Transnet Engineering is playing a critical role in driving Africa's industrialization agenda, with a strong focus on regional collaboration and localized manufacturing. He made the remarks during a media tour hosted by Transnet Engineering in the city of Cape Town. The tour also highlighted potential export opportunities, cross-border partnerships, and prospects for job creation. Channel Africa business reporter Innocent Samosa was there and filed this report.
Operational efficiencies, financial strain, competitive pressures, and capacity constraints. These are just some of the pressing challenges facing Transnet today. In Cape Town, General Manager of Transnet Manufacturing and Ports, Mr. Tshwanelo Tswai, addressed members of the media. He emphasized that while Transnet continue to working towards profitability, vandalism of infrastructure remains a significant obstacle.
Well, vandalism, I think it's a country problem currently. We're looking at many different ways in terms of, let's say, for instance, we have the, as a plant, there could be people coming under always, the water storm drains coming into our plants. In Kudesport, they do the same. Ours is to make sure that the security is in order and we make sure that we protect the employees as such.
I asked him whether the support from National Treasury aligns with Transnet's turnaround strategy. Here's what he had to say.
The role of TE, it's always been clear. Let's say, for instance, in terms of the budget, the market, if in case they advertise any tender, they come with their own budget, and they will then, we tender into the work, we then do the work and sell to them. Now, in that, we then create employment, where when we get the tender, we then employ more people into our manufacturing space and making sure that we deliver that work on time. So it does mean that we do create job opportunities.
Kola Diende, Chief Procurement Officer at Transnet Engineering, says the entity's broader vision is to position itself as a leading African powerhouse in engineering and manufacturing.
True, but also if you talk about the region, maybe let's start with South Africa. From a skills perspective, right? So we're enhancing the skills that exist and some that may have been lost. So it's safe to say a lot happened because of COVID and other challenges in the economy, whether local or international. But with this, we are now saying that we want to, from a port perspective, right? We also want to diversify and move out of South Africa into the region, but you first have to prove yourself, and I think we've done exactly that. From a rolling stock maintenance and rolling stock manufacturing, I think there it's a no-brainer, right? We've always been open for business, and we'll continue to be open for business.
As Transnet navigates these challenging times, its leadership says it remains committed to restoring operational efficiency and building a stronger, more resilient entity. For Channel Africa News, I am Innocent Samosa in Cape Town, South Africa.
So every Thursday we look at the latest episode of our flagship podcast. It's called Channel Africa Conversations, and it's presented by none other than my colleague over here, Peter Ndoro. So what can we look forward to in terms of this week's podcast?
So, Asanda, I had a really fascinating conversation with a Zimbabwean physician scientist, and essentially what it is, she's a doctor, and she then went into clinical research and set up something in the United States, but in Africa is where she's really doing her work. Her name is Dr. Tariro Makadzange, and she heads the Africa Clinical Research Network. And what she's saying is essentially that we really need to take charge of our own clinical research. She was giving me fascinating statistics like 18% of the global population is African, and yet only 3% of research is on Africans. And yet we have the most diverse body of people. And so a lot of the research doesn't quite apply to our health realities. And so we need to actually lead the way and do things for ourselves and develop our own medicines, etc., etc. I mean, she really did give us a fascinating conversation on that. Let's listen to what she told me.
And so that led me to head to Oxford and work with a group that was working on developing an HIV vaccine for Africa. And working with them, I ended up spending quite a bit of time working in Kenya and got to see how do collaborations work across continents, how do you set up labs, do research that is both community and lab based. And it really inspired me to start to think about a career that not only combines science and clinical care, but was also rooted in Africa with global connections, but building the capabilities on the continent.
So that's my conversation with Dr. Tariro Makadzange, really urging us, and she's leading the way because she's set up this clinical research network to develop research in Africa. Okay, right. And you can listen to that conversation on YouTube, this week's edition of Channel Africa Conversations.
Awesome one to look forward to there. Also to look forward to is On the Move, which comes after Africa Rise and Shine here on Channel Africa by Benjamin Mushatama and Palesa Tao. Palesa joining us in studio now to tell us what to expect. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Top of the morning too.
Tell me, Asanda, what was your favorite game as a child?
What was it called? That one with the stones? You draw a circle. Yes, of course, it was something else. What was it? But you draw a circle, yes. You put stones in there, then you have another circle that you throw in the air. You have to catch it before you take out some out of the circle.
In Tswana, we call it diketo.
Oh yeah, that was my favorite one as a child.
So of course, childhood games are a universal language for everyone, and no matter where you go, whether it's a village or a city or a town, there'll be specific games that children there play. But why did we lose that spirit of playing? Because it's also really part of not just development and growth when we were younger, but a way to sort of just free your spirit sometimes. And because we get into the thick of things as adults, we forget how to play. So we'll be speaking about that, adults playing and finding moments to play again. We'll be speaking to Theophilus Chabalala in the first hour of the show. And then in today's Becoming feature, we speak about, like any company has a board of advisors. And essentially as humans, we need a board of advisors too. And who are those people? And how do we create that community around us? People who are your mentors, people who you trust for advice, people who you're able to, use as a sounding board for various things in your life. So that's what we'll be speaking about. Who's on your board and who's helping you grow in your personal space and even in your professional space as well.
And if you've got the wrong people.
I think, and we need to be very mindful of that one. I think what's important for me would be somebody, or at least one person in the group who's older, and at least another person who does something completely different from what I do professionally. And maybe a third person would be someone who's not a mom, like I'm a mom. I'd want people who are very different from me.
And also people that are not afraid to tell you the truth.
Yes, that's very important.
Yeah, because sadly, we don't want to hurt each other's feelings, and so we start to sugarcoat things, and that's not helpful.
And it doesn't help you growing anyway when that happens. Well, that's our second hour conversation. In our final hour is our parenting and family corner. And, around this time of the year, a lot of young kids are writing their exams, and it's time for them to sort of look into what's going on then. Of course, there's a lot of stress on the brain and a lot of focus on the textbook itself. But we're going to be looking at something called Neuroagility Profile, that's NAP. It's an assessment that offers a powerful way for young people to understand how their brain works best, how they learn, and where their natural talents lie. So we're going to find out a little bit more about Neuroagility Profiles with Rushka Lee, Certified Neuroagility Profile Practitioner and Life Coach.
Do you know, it's fascinating.
Does it form part of educational psychology, that?
Do you know what it is?
Yeah.
Some kids learn better by listening.
Yes.
Some kids learn better by writing.
Yeah.
Some kids learn better by drawing pictures.
Yeah.
I'm very visual.
Yes.
So as you're talking, I'll draw these, what do they call those?
So you'll be like mind maps.
Yeah, mind maps.
Yeah.
That way, that's the best way for me to understand. Just reading text is very difficult for me. And the key is to find out what's your thing. If you're a person who hears things and remembers, record the things and listen to them on tapes.
Yeah. But, it's great because then these kids would have to go through a profile assessment, really understand how their brain works, and maybe adjust their learning abilities to the way that works best for them as individuals.
So that's what I wanted to know. That is it part of educational psychology where you would have to take the child there specifically because an issue has been picked up by the teacher at school? Or is it something that a parent can just do generally? I
think it's just something a parent can just do, because I don't think a child there shouldn't be any problems. Everybody learns different already. And perhaps if you're a parent and you want to find out how your child can sort of optimize themselves, you could take them there, find out a little bit more about their neuroagility profile, and maybe help them work in that way going forward.
Yeah, so because
my neuroagility profile is to say it's time to say goodbye.
Not yet, we've got 30 seconds. No, because my thing is, if a child gets pulled out of class by a teacher to say we've noticed that something is wrong, and then you take the child to a psychologist after that, it might make the child feel some type of way.
Might
so maybe it's better to be proactive on that one.
All right.
To be reactive. Okay, well, let's go. Let's go. Peter's ready to run out of here.
You can go to the move. It's okay.
Have a great day, everybody. I'm Peter Ndoro.
And I'm Asanda Beda. Bye-bye from us.
The news is next with Jalani Tulongwepe. It's 9 o'clock.
SABC News.